Hello guys, this is your friend Naruto Audio Fanfics and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto witnessed a different Uchiha massacre and received a forbidden gift, Naruto times OC, Kakashi times OC, Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Uchiha Itachi. First son of Uchiha Fugaku and Uchiha Makoto. Immensely skilled from the very beginning of his shinobi career, he proved time and time again that he deserved the title of a prodigy. Graduating at the academy at age 7, a feat that no one ever managed, since he only took a year to become a genin and it didn't take him long to pass the chunin exams at the age of 10. By the time he was 13, with an already completely evolved Sharingan, his family's famous Dujutsu, he was already enrolled in the most prestigious and honored ninja organization in Konoha called Anbu. He was revered by everyone, both because of his lineage and his skills. Men would dream of surpassing him and women dreamed of marrying him, fangirls. He was pretty much the center of attention, which was pretty hard, considering that Konoha had already some famous shinobi like Sharingan no Kakashi and one of the daimyo's 12 guardians and first son of the Sandaime Hokage Sarutobi Asuma. However, in the midst of all these qualifications, the one man who could have made a difference in Itachi's life was his father Fugaku. Because of his position as the firstborn son, Itachi's father always pressured him for better results than his second son Sasuke. Strict and never once displaying any hint of emotion that would make a son happy, Fugaku did, instead, create a weapon capable of pretty much everything that was chakra-oriented. Now at the age of 17, Itachi now had a team of Anbu under his charge and one of the most capable captains since Hitaki Kakashi, son of the White Fang Hitaki Sakumo. So, one could say that he was pretty happy with the ways things were going. Wrong. For those who knew him or rather thought they did, like his father, mother and little brother Uchiha Sasuke, ever since he joined Anbu, Itachi grew cold and distant, oftentimes, accusing the Uchiha clan of not using their gifts to their fullest capacity, which infuriated his father Fugaku greatly. It was already midnight, the rain was pounding heavily in Konoha and Itachi's Anbu team was in charge of scouting the village for any suspicious activity going on. Standing on top of a rather small tree was a lone Anbu member wearing a weasel mask while looking at the area below. Because it was night, one could only see his body outline, but if one were to look closely, he or she would be able to envision the famous Sharingan eye in all its glory. Bloody red and with 3 black tones would send shivers even to the most ruthless of individuals with the promise of a quick death, courtesy of the famous Uchiha clan. Suddenly, his eyes caught the usage of chakra running through the rooftops and the Anbu captain was positive that whoever it was didn't belong to his team and the fact that everyone was sleeping this time at night, so it could only be a rogue ninja. Immediately positioning 2 fingers on the side of his mask, he signaled the intruder's position to his team, before he left his position to follow the perpetrator. It didn't take long before the Uchiha appeared in front of the man who in turn stopped immediately upon seeing resistance to his plan. Itachi could very well see the Iwa headband and the fact that it had a horizontal slash to it, meaning he was in fact a missing nin. So speaking with a monotone voice, Itachi addressed the man. You have no business in here Iwa nin and on top of that, you just committed a serious offense by invading the hidden village in the leaves. A very stupid mistake which will be dealt with immediately. Prepare to die, said Itachi, while with his arms crossed not doing anything, but what the enemy didn't know was that the Uchiha already trapped him inside a genjutsu. Go to hell all of you leaf scum, I will kill at least one shinobi from the leaf because of what your Yondaime Hokage did for my village. Because of him, my family was killed and my mother sacrificed herself to save me. Prepare Anbu for your death, shouted the missing nin, but before he could thrust his kunai on Itachi's torso, the man suddenly flinched in agony as it appeared that a hidden enemy was lurking in the shadows. However, he realized too late that he was looking directly at Itachi's eyes, a move that proved to be one fatal mistake. Itachi's genjutsu was meant to disrupt the man's senses and overload his brain until it proved to be fatal. When Itachi's team arrived at the scene, the man was already unconscious lying on the Uchiha's feet. Turning to his second in command, an Anbu with long purple hair and a cat mask, he ordered his team to take the man to Ibiki and then return to their first assigned mission, before vanishing within a great number of crows. The next day Due to the sunlight in his eyes, Itachi woke up and immediately set out to do his morning routine, which composed of a few stretches followed by heavy and very advanced taijutsu without the use of the Sharingan, of course. Itachi firmly believed that the Sharingan, while a handy tool in battle, could blind its user from over-depending on the dojutsu to fight his battles. Afterwards, he went inside the compound for some light breakfast, before wearing his boots once more to train some accuracy in a secluded place that only he knew. However, just as he was about to get up and leave, he heard someone screaming while running straight at him, before Itachi poked the infant's forehead with his fingers, thus stopping little Sasuke's movements. "Nisan, you know I hate it when you do this. Hey, do you want to play ninja with me?" asked Sasuke with a broad smile on his face as expected from any child his age. Itachi, despite his stoic demeanor, just couldn't say no to his little brother. Sasuke was like him. He enjoyed training and wouldn't give up until he learned it correctly, a posture not at all followed by the rest of the clan who preferred to train only until their Sharingan awakens. "Sasuke, I'm not interested in playing ninja with you," said Itachi, before he saw the dejected face of his brother, carving for his brother's attention. "However, you could accompany me and see me training, instead," stated Itachi, this time seeing Sasuke's smile once more. It didn't take long until the Uchiha brothers were in a secluded vegetation site filled with the trees and rocks. Sasuke was looking around and noticed a few targets displayed in multiple directions, and he presumed that Itachi would hit them one by one. However, when the little one saw his brother holding 8 kunais in his both hands at the same time, Sasuke was skeptical even if this was his brother he was talking about. Suddenly, Itachi vanished from his place in the middle of the field, before appearing up in the air and flipping his body for a free head fall. While falling, he calculated the exact moment needed and threw 6 of the kunais towards the targets, but only 4 were aimed for the bull's eye. Afterwards, he flipped his body once more and used the remaining 2 projectiles and threw them towards the 2 that weren't heading for the target, thus fixing their trajectory and the same time, aiming towards the last 2 targets. When he hit the ground, Sasuke couldn't say a word as he saw the 8 targets all with a kunai in the middle at the same time. "Nisan, that was amazing. Can you teach me how to do it?" shouted Sasuke, and Itachi could very well see that the boy was eager to learn it, even though it was considered an advanced move to perform. So, he gave a few pointers and told Sasuke to practice. Eager, Sasuke tried and tried harder, but much to his dismay, he just couldn't do it. He has been trying for a whole hour and only the most obvious targets were hit, leaving out the hidden ones. However, while Itachi could do it for a longer period of time, Sasuke didn't have enough chakra to sustain that long, hence why the big brother had to carry the little one on his back the way home. Eventually, Sasuke managed to wake up and noticed where he was and who was carrying him. I'm sorry, Nisan. I don't have as much chakra as you do," said Sasuke with a dejected face. "That's only obvious, Sasuke Otudo. Your chakra pathways are only beginning its development. Not to mention that I have more experience than you in being a shinobi. You couldn't afford to be better than me, we're not even the academy you graduated yet," explained Itachi, earning a temper from his little brother. "Yeah, well, not everyone graduates after only a year, you know, but I will surpass you. Mark my words, Nisan," stated Sasuke, earning a nod from Itachi. "It's greatly beneficial to think like that, Otudo. It wouldn't anyone any good if surpassing the older generation wasn't one of their goals. Growing up, surpassing father was a goal of mine, you know," said Itachi while Sasuke was listening to every bit of the older brother's reason. "It will come a time, Sasuke, when we'll fight against each other, and it's my wish that you surpass me in every way," said Itachi, until they arrived at the compound. After getting Sasuke to bed, Itachi was now walking towards his room until his father called out to him for a conversation. Just seeing his old man, Itachi couldn't help but feel sorry for him. Fugaku had the skills and no doubt could become way stronger than he is right now, but just like all Uchiha, the man was focused exclusively on his Sharingan and nothing and no one convinced him otherwise. Itachi kneeled on the tatame and eyed his father for a while, before the man initiated the conversation. "Itachi, I know you have your duties as an Anbu captain, but this exact time tomorrow, the Uchiha clan will gather for a reunion and I expect you to be here on schedule. Am I clear?" asked Fugaku, to which Itachi nodded, before getting up and leaving, not even bothering to greet his person he had to call father, which infuriated the man. How dare you just leave and turn your back on me? I'm your father and as such, I demand your respect, shouted Fugaku, but much to his dismay, Itachi didn't flinch nor did he turn to look at his father in the eyes. For all I know, this conversation was over the moment I offered my consent to the Uchiha reunion. There is no reason for me to remain here. So, if you excuse me, I'll be in my room for the duration of the day, said Itachi, before walking outside the room and closing the door, without even waiting for a reply, which pissed Fugaku even more. Once Itachi started walking, he saw Sasuke practicing the first katas of the family's taijutsu and smiled, seeing that even if Sasuke passed out first from chakra exhaustion, he was now training once more with the intent of surpassing his older brother. 2 days later. No sooner the sunlight appeared, members of the Uchiha police corps knocked on the door demanding to see Itachi. Uchiha Inabi, Uchiha Teka and Uchiha Yashira found, this morning, the body of Uchiha Shisui at the river near the Uchiha propriety, and next to his body, a note was found as well, apparently being a suicide note. Suddenly, Itachi appeared outside the house while facing the three Uchihas. What's the meaning of this outburst? Asked Itachi as he stoically eyed his Sharingan peers. Uchiha Inabi, black long hair and wearing a gray outfit, narrowed his eyes. Oi Itachi, we would like to know why you didn't attend to the Uchiha clan meeting yesterday, asked Inabi, but as usual he saw no reaction whatsoever from the elder Uchiha. I understand that, as Anbu, you have to be involved in many troublesome tasks. Your father says so and somehow covers for you, but we do not play favorites here. I understand, I'll be careful from now on, said Itachi with his eyes closed, thus dismissing the manners of the reunion incident, but the interrogatory didn't end with the reunion. There is another matter that needs to be discussed. This morning, we found the body of Uchiha Shisui dead at the river, and we also noticed he wasn't present at the meeting either. Now, I know that you and Shisui are quite close, Itachi, stated Yashira, gray hair, looking like his eyes were closed. Itachi just nodded and looked down in memory to his old friend, older brother. I haven't seen him in a while, it's unfortunate, was all he said, but something about it didn't bode well with the Uchiha detectives. So we of the police force devoted our time to solving this matter, said Inabi, to which Itachi narrowed his sight. Yashira, then, grabbed a note from within his holster and gave it to Itachi. We checked the note and Shisui's handwriting indeed matches, however we know that anyone with a Sharingan could mimic it, making it look like he committed suicide, explained Yashira, while Itachi was reading the suicidal letter. Uchiha Shisui was one of our clan's elite and feared throughout the elemental nations as Shunshin no Shisui. It's hard to think that such a man would kill himself, said Teka, before they saw Itachi activate his Sharingan while crumbling Shisui's note. Why don't you say it already? You're accusing me of killing Shisui, snarled Itachi, before he charged the three detectives, before pounding their faces with force, sending them to the ground, before getting up. You shouldn't judge people based on appearances alone. You don't know what really happened, and even so, here you are accusing me of murdering Uchiha Shisui, said Itachi, before he heard a familiar voice behind him. Itachi, stop right now. Ever since you joined Anbu, you've been acting strange lately, said Fugaku, before he saw his son standing and then kneeling down in apparent shame for what he did. I didn't kill Shisui, but what I did was improper, and for that I apologize, said Itachi, before getting up once more and went back to his house, since he was ordered to present at Anbu in half an hour. Fugaku eyed his son with suspicion. He once thought that Itachi joining the Anbu division would bring glory to the clan, but instead it changed his son in a negative manner, he thought. The day of the massacre. Sasuke Uchiha was going home after a nice day at the academy. His class learned the first steps of shuriken throwing and Sasuke got the highest score of the class. Another thought that made him happy was that the conversation he had with his father, and that his two-san didn't hate Itachi, even after Itachi did a number on the Uchiha detectives from accusing him of killing one of the clan. It was already late at night and he thought his mother would reprimand him from being out in the streets this late. However, the minute he stepped inside the Uchiha compound, he froze. He didn't know what this feeling was, but all he knew is that it made his instincts shout at him to turn and run away. Suddenly, he looked up to a lightning post to where he thought that someone was there watching him, but no one was there. As he walked inside the compound, he noticed the light was off, but it couldn't be bedtime, since the sun just barely set. However, by making a turn into a corner, his vision paled. Looking around, all he saw were bodies sprawled on the floor, kunais lodged on the walls, and lots of blood all over the place. He was already too scared to even make another step, but now a new thought entered his mind. Before he screamed his mother's name and ran towards his house. The minute he grabbed the doorknob, the feeling of dread returned full speed and he was already hyperventilating from fear. He looked around but saw nothing, until he saw his parents' room, which happened to be the last place he needed to search. The problem, though, was that he just couldn't open it, fearing that his mother and father shared the same fate as those on the street. Sasuke was a child. He couldn't help but shake in fear at the situation. He, then, sucked in and opened the door with a thud, only for immediate tears to soon fall from his eyes. There they were, his mother and father on the floor covered by their own blood. Itachi was there as well with his Anbu uniform as he looked at Sasuke. "Nisan, what happened?" said Sasuke, but was interrupted when a flying shuriken just passed from him before being lodged at the door. But immediately afterwards, Sasuke's sleeve was cut as well as his skin, before he used his hands to stop it from hurting. "Nisan, what happened? What are you doing? Who did this?" shouted Sasuke, too afraid to link the dots of the fact that it was the very person he was asking that committed the heavy sin. "Foolish little brother," said Itachi, before he saw Sasuke just drown himself in tears as he finally learned what happened. "Why, Nisan? Why did you this? Why?" shouted Sasuke. "To test my capacity, oh Tudo. You want to know how it happened, don't you? I'll grant your request, Manjinkyu Sharingan," said Itachi, until his three tomo transformed into a full-fledged black shuriken, before the technique hit Sasuke dead on. Right before his eyes, a full horde of shurikens flew through the Uchiha estate, killing everyone, and those who managed to deflect the projectiles tried attacking Itachi, only for the genius Uchiha to wipe them out with his ninjutsu. Sasuke couldn't take it anymore. The screams, the sound of shurikens being embedded on the bodies, the sound of his father and mother screaming for Itachi to stop this madness, and then hearing the screams of his mother of agony after receiving a direct attack from Itachi's sword, it was too much for a child's mind to bear. He screamed and screamed like there was no tomorrow and just ran away, scared that his brother would finish him too. However, the torture wasn't over, and when Sasuke appeared outside, Itachi was there as well and used the technique once more, thus forcing Sasuke to relive everything over and over again. The reason why Genjutsu was so feared was that the attack couldn't be seen or heard, or at least felt it before it already happened, and it could very well destroy the opponent's senses and organs by disrupting the inner chakra. So, after replaying such a gruesome sight over and over again, it proved to be too much to the young Uchiha, who suddenly stopped crying, stopped holding his head to ease the pain, and just fell limp on the ground. After dispelling the technique, a thunder suddenly illuminated the area, like it was Kami's way of punishing Itachi for the sin he just committed. Killing his family in cold blood was cruel, yes, but doing what he did to Sasuke was truly a work of a monster, a psychopath who didn't know the word remorse. With Naruto . A few minutes before the massacre, Uzumaki Naruto walked out of the apartment the Sandaime Hokage so kindly rented for him to use, after he was kicked out of the orphanage for God knows what. The Hokage even gave Naruto some money for the essentials, food and some water. However, without any known reason, when Naruto tried to purchase anything, he was either kicked out of the shop or they refused to sell him anything, in a secret hope that the demon kid, as he was known throughout the streets for, to die from thirst or hunger. Now, because of this, all he was left with were searching through garbage cans to see if he could find any leftovers. Not knowing what was happening at the Uchiha clan compound, Naruto found a large stock of garbage cans right in front of the compound entrance, but sadly for him, the garbage was empty and his stomach was voicing his discomfort for the lack of food. He was cursing the rich red-eyed people for not supplying him with at least a piece of bread, until he heard something that shocked his entire system. A pitched scream, but it wasn't just a scream. Naruto could sense that the person was suffering enormous pain and looked up only to see two shades, one standing and one kneeling on the ground holding his head, and Naruto could see that it was the person kneeling on the ground that was screaming. Suddenly, though, the person stopped and just fell on the floor like nothing happened. Wanting to help the boy, Naruto ran with all his might to help, However, before he made another step inside the compound, he saw a bright light coming towards him. The light proved to be a small fire that hit Naruto dead on his face, which earned a loud shout of pain coming from the blonde. Cursing this boy's intrusion and obviously loud scream, Itachi figured that the entire Anbu force would find out what happened, meaning he had to escape right away. And so he did, not even bothering to see what his attack did on Naruto. As to Naruto, the pain was so unbearable that the kid passed out on the floor. At the hospital. Sandaime Hokage was having a normal day. People were coming in and out of his office with papers to sign, the normal schedule of a cage. However, when the news hit him of what happened in the Uchiha compound, his heart immediately sank and he couldn't believe Itachi did kill his whole clan. He was now looking at the window from the door that both Naruto and Sasuke were being treated, until the doctor appeared for the report. Hokage-sama, may I speak to you? Asked the head doctor, earning a nod from the old man, before the doctor continued. Sir, we've been able to heal Uzumaki Naruto's wounds and I'm happy to report that his face wasn't damaged even though he received a small fireball directly, said the doctor, but the smile on the Hokage's face proved to be too much for the physician to handle right now as he continued with his report. Nevertheless, Hokage-sama, while his face wasn't damaged, little Naruto's eyes took all the damage. The fire burned his retina and eye sockets. Sir, I'm afraid that little Naruto won't be able to use his eyes ever again, reported the physician, before he saw the old man's eyes wide in shock, just before tears started to fall. Isn't there anything you can do, Takashi-san? You can't heal his eyes? Asked the Hokage, but looked down once the man nodded his head in the negative. We could do one thing, although I need your permission for it, asked Takashi, before he saw the Hokage lift his head in surprise. I was about to say it after Naruto's report, but we checked for any form of reflex coming from Uchiha Sasuke, but sadly we couldn't find one. You see, when the person is unconscious, his body parts would still move on occasion. So, upon checking his body for further injuries, we managed to see some heavy damage to the brain cells as it's obvious that Sasuke suffered from some serious mental trauma that led to brain death, explained Takashi. What did Itachi do to him? He couldn't possibly use a genjutsu on a 6-year-old, it's just non-human, but why are you telling me about this? What's on your mind, Takashi? Asked the Hokage. Sir, there is a way to salvage Naruto's sight, but that will only happen if we find another pair of eyes that we could replace his damaged ones with. Being that said, I believe that the best option would be to transplant Sasuke's eyes to replace Naruto's. Given the case, it's the only option we have, said Takashi, before he studied Sarutobi's facial expressions. Hiruzen for his part began to think about what the head doctor was offering. In one hand, Naruto would be able to see once more and thus he could pursue his dream of becoming a shinobi in the future, but on the other hand, Sasuke's eyes carried the Sharingan Dujutsu and thus by giving it to Naruto, the Dujutsu will be passed on to the blonde. Sarutobi wasn't ignorant to the effects the kaleidoscope eye did to the user and he feared that Naruto will become too power-hungry just like many Uchihas in the past. However, it wouldn't be the first time one shinobi receives a Sharingan transplant and the one who received it managed to control its urges without any trouble. He had no choice, though, as this is Naruto's only chance of seeing once more. Takashi-san, you have my consent for the operation, please proceed and let me know if something happens, said Sarutobi, before he turned and left towards his house to get some rest, cause from tomorrow forward, Konoha will surely change. 2 days after the Uchiha massacre, rumors spread about what happened and people conjured several theories as to the reason behind Itachi's actions. Some believed that he was mentally unstable and couldn't handle the pressure of being an Anbu prodigy, the same as being a clan heir to one of the founding clans of the village. Others, though, didn't even care about the mental issue, judging the man as nothing more than a criminal and one of the worst caliber, because no matter how pressured one man was, there was no excuse for murdering his entire family. Despite all the rumors, though, one man had to deal with the facts. No matter Itachi's reasons for doing what he did, Sarutobi Hiruzen, the Sandaime Hokage, was rubbing his temples while dealing with the fact that an entire clan was just wiped out by a single man and, surprisingly, none of his Anbu forces were near the vicinity to stop such a terrible act of cruelty. Nonetheless, the man had to take into account that the past is unchangeable and as of 2 days prior, the Uchiha clan, once known as one of the most powerful clan in existence, was no more. And to think that Itachi would go so far as to kill his own little brother in the most vicious way possible. Hiruzen still shuddered while wondering how one of his Anbu captains could use such powerful illusions on his own little brother to the point of causing brain death. Still, the mystery remained regarding what exactly Itachi showed to Sasuke that it leads to the little boy dying. After everything that happened, though, the only possible act he could do as Hokage was to provide a proper funeral for those of the Uchiha clan in respect for how much they provided to the village's protection since its foundation. He picked one report from a squadron of hunter nins who were in charge of pursuing Itachi's whereabouts, but without engaging him in battle. They returned, though, with a failed mission as the man simply vanished from the face of the earth. Actually, Sarutobi kind of expected this outcome, since Itachi not only was considered a prodigy in his family's eyes but also the Ansatsu Senjutsu Tokushu Butai, Anbu themselves. The man was trained to simply disappear, and with the Sharingan, it would be a child's play for Itachi to cast a wide-scale genjutsu to prevent people from seeing him. Because of the Hunternan's team failed report, Sarutobi didn't even have to think twice before adding Itachi to the bingo book as an S-ranked criminal and missing nin, and this would serve for two purposes. One, in order to prevent any shinobi of Konoha to even attempt a duel against the only remaining Uchiha, and second, in order to spread the word to other nations about him no longer being a ninja from Konoha, in case people are afraid of causing a war against the hidden village in the leaves. Surely, no one would be crazy to do so, but still it was a possibility. Furthermore, the last, but not less important issue that Sarutobi needed to handle, and that was the blonde bundle of joy named Uzumaki Naruto, and the fact that the kid ended up being another victim of Itachi's acts. From what the analysis of the boy concluded was that he received a Kaden ninjutsu straight to his face, thus burning his eye sockets and retina. However, according to the doctor in charge, by performing an eye transfusion, in particular, Sasuke's eyes, there was a high probability that the blonde would be able to see once more. The surgery went fine, and now Naruto was under the control of painkillers and anesthesia, so that he can rest without the pain of having a pair of eyes he wasn't used to. The doctor named Takashi said that by the time Naruto woke up, his body would have adjusted to the new set of eyes and he wouldn't feel any kind of difference from his old ones, well, except for the appearance now. Whereas Naruto's old eyes were vivid cerulean blue eyes, he now possessed deep black ones that would contradict with the boy's hyperactive nature. Nevertheless, it was the only thing Sarutobi could do in order to salvage the boy's sight, and he knew he would rather kill himself if the boy, on top of being the village pariah for something he didn't do nor asked for, also lost his ability to see. Naruto, he knew, always had a dream of becoming a ninja, and even though it wasn't impossible to become one because of one's blindness, it just wouldn't be fair to him. Truth be told, though, while he managed to salvage the blonde's sight, Sarutobi was thinking the long term in this manner. He knew Uchiha Sasuke never awakened the Sharingan, but what he doesn't know is about the possibility of Naruto developing the cursed Dujutsu. The old man understood as much about genetics as Jiraiya respected the other. The doctor assured him that such a thing was impossible, as the Sharingan Dujutsu wasn't just because of the eyes, but rather the Uchiha's blood and DNA. So, that being said, even if Naruto possessed Sasuke's eyes, he wouldn't be able to awaken the Dujutsu. However, Hiruzen had enough experience not to presume anything, and while the probabilities were slim, there were still a slight chance that the blonde manages to awaken the Sharingan. For all he knew, Kakashi's Sharingan eye should have remained with Tsutomu, since he received it from his dying friend Obito, but the Hitaki prodigy managed to fully evolve the Sharingan to 3 tomos, and he doesn't possess the Uchiha blood or DNA. Closing his eyes and rubbing his temples in pure frustration, the old man changed his course of thinking for the meantime. This subject was extremely delicate, and he would allow some of his time to dwell on it further, of course with the help of Kakashi, since he happens, now, to share a similar fate. Now, though, as Hokage, he was needed by the village in order to keep things moving, so he started to clean the damned paperwork, since missions were coming non-stop, and that happens to be Konoha's income. At the hospital Room 608. There wasn't a day that tragedies didn't end at the hospital, as doctors and nurses often commented in their coffee break. People came for whatever reason, from having the feeling that something's wrong with their body to someone on the verge of death. This was their world, to heal the wounded, to save those whose death is hanging at a balance. So despite it all, they managed to find a sort of hobby so that they could cope with the emotional stress of saving lives. Gossip. The minute Uchiha Sasuke and Uzumaki Naruto arrived unconscious at the hospital, what Takashi said to the Hokage was already common knowledge of entire hospital staff. Some of the doctors didn't flinch when they knew what happened to Uchiha Sasuke, simply because they were already used in dealing with severe cases and this was just another one. However, the inexperienced ones were feeling nothing more than pure hatred for what an older brother did to the youngest. So, ever since the massacre happened, Room 608 became the center of attention for all the staff, especially because of the surgery took over 10 hours and the head doctor Takashi had to be dispatched home from fear of the man succumbing right there inside the surgery room. Nonetheless, the surgery was a success and at least, the hospital was able to salvage Uzumaki Naruto's eyesight. It didn't matter that some of the staff tried to dissuade the head doctor against saving Naruto's eyes, since they all knew who the boy is or rather what he represent. A vast majority of the staff remembered the chaos that befallen the hidden village in the leaves when the almighty demon Kyuubi no Yoko attacked and as such, people felt that by leaving Naruto as it is, would be like punishing the demon for his deeds against Konoha. In the end, though, the head doctor Takashi went through with it, while, proudly, saying that a doctor's job is to heal the wounded, not worry about who the wounded is or what he did wrong. Even if the man never thought ill of the kid. Now, because of the painkillers and anesthesia, Naruto wouldn't wake up until later today when Takashi would remove the blind holds that were preventing the boy's new eyes from being damaged. Room 608 . Before, the room was occupied by two individuals, now only one was resting in the middle of the room. His eye region was covered by straps in order to prevent a possible infection, seeing as it was a possible outcome of the surgery. The room, no, the entire floor was silent except for noises caused by a nurse's high heels on the cold marble floor. However, whereas outside one could hear a pin drooping on the floor, inside Naruto's mind, it was a different issue entirely. Neeson, why you're doing this? Foolish little brother. I did just to test my abilities. Scenes of what Sasuke witnessed appeared before Naruto's very eyes as if he was the one witnessing everything. The blonde couldn't understand, though, he didn't remember seeing anything like it. The agonizing screams of a child as he started holding his head in order to stop the immeasurable pain. Naruto never saw so much blood in his entire life and the view itself sent chills down his entire body. But why? Why was he seeing all this? The last thing he remembered was searching at the garbage cans for some food and the sudden bright light that hit him straight in the face, before his world went blank. Suddenly, the screaming and the pain stopped and Naruto opened his eyes suddenly as if he just awoke from a nightmare, but instead all he could see was white. He, then, screamed in agony while wondering where he was, thus alerting the attending nurse on the floor. She, then, saw that the blonde has awakened and called for the head doctor Takashi to come see what was happening. The man was at the door in minutes and witnessed the blonde on the bed, kicking everything, screaming for dear life. He, then, approached the boy and explained what happened since he lost consciousness. Naruto-kun, settle down, my name is Takashi and you're at Konoha Public Hospital, said Takashi, before the blonde relaxed somewhat. Now, it was all explained when he saw white. Why am I in the hospital? What happened to me? Asked Naruto, while Takashi ordered the nurse to call the Hokage. You were victim of a shinobi fire attack directly to your face. We managed to heal everything. Just wait for me to remove these straps from your eyes, so that you could see me. Everything will be explained once the Hokage arrives, explained Takashi, while he was busy unwrapping Naruto's new eyes, so that he could take a look at it. However, the head doctor was ill-prepared for what he saw the second he laid eyes on Naruto's new set of eyes. Whereas Sasuke's regular eyes were black and it was when it was implanted into Naruto's sockets, now it was red carrying one tomo. This couldn't have happened, Takashi reasoned. The Sharingan was peculiar to the Uchiha's DNA system, therefore the only way Naruto could have the Sharingan was if it was already awakened at the moment of the transplant. Meanwhile, the blonde was looking at Takashi while confused as hell. Before, all he could see was the person in front of him. Now, though, the information that was being transferred to his brain was that of a strange blue substance. Ah, excuse me, Dr. San, but what did you do to my eyes? Asked Naruto, not sure and a little bit worried about the look of shock displayed by Takashi. The men for his part couldn't for his life understand how Naruto managed to awake the Dujutsu, even though he had an Uchiha's eyes. Sorry Naruto-kun, but I'll have to wait for the Hokage to arrive before I can explain what happened to your eyes. You're free to look at them, though if you feel like it. Here, take this mirror. After grabbing the mirror and placing it in front of his face, Naruto went paled instantly. It couldn't be true, he shouted inside his head. The boy almost never looked himself in the mirror, but he didn't need that to know that his eyes were light blue, not the same as those red-eyed stuck-up bastards who, accordingly to the blonde, considered themselves more important than Kami himself. Naruto noticed that the Hokage was at the door, but he was so engrossed in his thoughts that he didn't even greet the old man. Meanwhile, Takashi already engaged in a conversation with the old man. Hiruzen, for his part, came running once he heard the news of Naruto getting better. However, when he arrived at the hospital and looked at the head doctor approaching him with a serious visage, he considered the worst-case scenario. Hokage-sama, as informed, the surgery was successful and the eyes were securely implanted. However, the most unusual thing happened, and I guess you should take a look yourself, sir, said Takashi, earning a nod from the Hokage as he approached the still-shocked Naruto. Suddenly, when Naruto's eyes appeared in his eyesight, the Hokage saw what was assured by the head doctor to be an impossible occurrence. There it was, Konoha's most famous Dujutsu, the Sharingan, and what appeared was that it was the first stage. Takashi-san, how did this happen? You assured me this couldn't have happened, asked the Hokage, while being a little bit afflicted by the blonde's new eyes. It wasn't that the man loathed the Sharingan, it was just that it conflicted heavily with Naruto's happy-go-lucky demeanor. When the old man looked at Naruto, before, his face was cheerful, you could just look at him and a smile would appear, but now it was the complete opposite. Naruto's face now bared a look of fear, coldness. It was like his personality left with his eyes. Immediately, the old man's old heart started to ache in sadness. Naruto was still able to see, but he now lacked the very characteristic Hiruzen always enjoyed seeing, and it used to fill his heart with joy every time. Takashi sighed in dismay and took a board with the attending nurse that was inside the room with them. He took a look at the chart and immediate shock and immediate realization was upon him. It was a comparative chart of 2 DNA tests, before and after the surgery that was required before the procedure starts. As he went through the data, he now saw that, somehow, Naruto's DNA changed, which in fact explained why he was able to awake the Dujutsu. Until now, I didn't have a clue why it happened, Hokage-sama, but now I do. As you can see in this chart, Naruto-kun's DNA system suffered some changes, presumably, because of the surgery. Apparently, an Uchiha's eye carries the family's DNA sequence, so that's why Naruto now possesses the Sharingan, explained Takashi as he handed the chart to the Hokage, before the old man started the analysis. Meanwhile, Naruto was now out of his self-induced coma and paid close attention of the conversation, at least the words he was able to understand as any 9-year-old infant. Nevertheless, he now understood why his eyes were different. Somehow, his old eyes were damaged and it was replaced by this new ones. Back to the Hokage, he returned the chart to the head doctor and looked at Naruto for a while. Brushing the thought of how Naruto managed to acquire the Sharingan, the Sandaime Hokage now wondered how Naruto was able to awake it. If memory serves, an Uchiha can only awaken his Dujutsu when in a life or death situation, and he was sure Naruto was not in this kind of situation. Naruto-kun, how are you feeling? Asked the Hokage for the first time, since he arrived, addressed the blonde. Naruto for his part looked at him for a while, before offering him his shoulders. I don't know what to tell you, Jizen. One moment I was looking for food in the garbage cans near the Uchiha compound, and the next time I'm in the hospital with different eyes. What is this anyhow? I'm looking at you, but I can also see a strange blue thing sparking within you, asked Naruto, earning a smile from the Hokage, since at least for now, Naruto's demeanor didn't change. As you know, Naruto-kun, your eyes belong to one Uchiha Sasuke. Because of a fire attack, your eyes were severely damaged, leaving us no other option but to do a transplant. Now, an Uchiha has a special ability that once awakened, it becomes an immense help while in battles. It's called the Sharingan and it's what you managed to awake, though the reasons still remain unknown. I won't bore you with an explanation about the Dujutsu in itself, because you'll receive this tutelage at the academy, or you could always read a book about it. Now, I know you mustn't remember, since you're asleep, but do you remember a situation where you were in a life or death situation? Asked Hokage, before seeing Naruto's puzzled look, and he explained further. The Sharingan can only be awakened when the user is on a tight spot and it's almost on the verge of death. You'd have to be in one, in order to awake it. I don't recall anything Jizen of that sort, but before I woke up today, I had this weird dream. It was already night time in the village and I've never seen so much blood and bodies on the ground dead before. I could hear a kid screaming, but I couldn't see him anywhere. At a man he was calling Nissan, who was wearing one of those weird masked guys that goes around the village. I figured it was a dream since I didn't remember anything of this, but somehow, I could feel an immeasurable pain both on my chest and my head. When I woke up and looked at my eyes, they were already like this, reported Naruto, earning a sigh in dismay from the Hokage as realization fell upon him. Somehow, Sasuke's memory was stored in his eyes as the last thing he saw, and the life and death situation Naruto participated was the exact same situation that Sasuke went through, although Itachi's genjutsu attacked Sasuke's mind, not Naruto's. So, Naruto now had the Sharingan and every piece missing of the story was already filled. The only question remained, can he deactivate the eyes? Naruto-kun, I trust you already learned some chakra introduction exercises at the academy, right? Asked Sarutobi, earning a nod from Naruto, before he continued. Right now, you somehow are focusing chakra to your eyes so that the Sharingan remains active. Please dispel your chakra for me, please. The blonde, then, nodded and closed his eyes in concentration, seeing as he was never any good in controlling his chakra for reasons that no one managed to explain it to him. When he opened, though, his eyes went back to normal just like any other Uchiha. Except that the blonde wasn't one. Sarutobi had enough answers to what he had to plan for the blonde, now that he is the sole barrier of the true Sharingan eye. Now, the next item of his agenda was to meet with Kakashi, since Naruto now needed to learn how to use the Sharingan and its peculiar abilities. Hiruzen was, though, a bit reluctant to look at Naruto's eyes even if the Sharingan wasn't active any longer. He thought that the blonde's unnerving sight was because of the Dujutsu, but it wasn't. Even with his black eyes, it still looked like it sucked his life away, and he now demonstrated a stoic demeanor. As the blonde watched the Hokage, he kept remembering about the nightmare he had, which, accordingly to the old man, was the trigger that activated the Dujutsu. Seeing as he didn't remember any of what happened, he always figured that it didn't happen in reality. Now, though, as he knew that he received Sasuke's eyes, somehow he was showing reluctance in admitting that it never happened before. Jizen, said Naruto, earning the old man's attention, who in part turned his neck slightly as in studying every bit of Naruto's face in order to get a grip of what he was feeling right now. The blonde noticed that he had the old man's full attention and continued to ask. Could you tell me if what I saw in my dream, the blood stained all over the ground, the bodies all piled up dead, and the immeasurable pain in my head, was it all real or just a dream? Asked Naruto, before he looked at the Hokage, in hopes that the man would land his hands on his shoulders and with a smile, say that it never happened, it was all a dream. However, Naruto saw no such thing. Instead, he noticed that the Sandaime was in loss for words, presumably searching for words that he could say to somehow ease this whole affair. I'm sorry, Naruto. I could very well have lied to you, telling you that was all a dream and you needn't worry about this, but by doing so, it wouldn't be fair to you. Everything you saw in your dream was nothing but reality. Uchiha Sasuke, the one whose eyes you received, witnessed his entire clan being slaughtered by his very brother Uchiha Itachi, to whom you described as wearing the different uniform. Itachi was the one that killed Sasuke by using a strange and powerful technique called genjutsu, which I assume you heard it already at the academy. The art of illusions is a dangerous skill, and as such it should be used with care. What Itachi did to Sasuke was to play and replay images of his entire family being killed right before his eyes, an act one find despicable and completely against what Konoha teaches our ninjas, explained Sarutobi, before looking at Naruto, who in turn was looking down towards his bed sheets while grabbing it and squeezing with as much strength as he could muster. Naruto was angry with everything he had to undertake every day, the hateful glares, the chases around the village, and now Uchiha Itachi's act of pure malice. The blonde was alone all his life, never once meeting other people outside the Hokage's office and the ramen stand. But even though the others maintained their glare at him, never once did Naruto consider why someone could do what Itachi do to his own family, to his own little brother. Both the Hokage and the head doctor understood Naruto's question, since this whole time, the blonde actually thought it was nothing more than a dream, but the sad part was that it wasn't just a dream. Nothing that appeared in Naruto's mind was a result of his conscious, or rather his subconscious. It was what Sasuke experienced the night of the massacre, and it now Sarutobi feared that Itachi's act not only killed Sasuke, but also managed to suck Naruto's hyperactive nature out of him. He tried to cover it up as nothing for the blonde to worry about it in hopes of saving the boy's emotions, but it was too late. Naruto, please understand that what Itachi did was unforgivable, but you must not allow this pure act of malice to change your attributes. Even though your usual cerulean blue eyes are gone, that doesn't mean your personality must be different, said Hokage, trying to convince the boy, but Naruto, instead, was just lost in thought. What the Hokage wanted for him to do was to forget about this and move on with his life, but how could he? The images, the screams, the terrible sound of metal cutting through flesh, it was all real and it would be forever in his mind. I just can't ignore this, Jizen. It's planted in my head already. There was so much blood and bodies laying on the ground, said Naruto as he was looking at Hiruzen, to whom was wondering who this little boy was, because this wasn't the Uzumaki Naruto he knew. My god, Minato. How could I do this to your son? Only 9 years old and he has already seen death in front of him. I guess he'll never be the same again. Rest a bit. Naruto, Takashi here will make some tests to make sure you're okay. Tomorrow you'll be free to go and I wish for you to come into my office tomorrow afternoon, okay? Asked the Hokage, earning a nod from the boy, before he was left alone in the room once more. Naruto wasn't tired, so he chose the alone time to wonder about the sudden turn of events. Sasuke wasn't a total stranger to the blonde. They met at the academy, although they rarely spoke with one another. The Uchiha was more of an antisocial, Naruto remembered, and he, constantly, got the best grades of the classroom. Thinking about the academy, now, Naruto couldn't help but sigh in dismay. What was he supposed to say to his peers? Naruto wouldn't call friends, but on occasions, 3 of the students in Azuka Kiba, Akamichi Choji and Nara Shikamaru, would cut class together with him. Imagine their surprise when his eyes are now black and he possesses the Sharingan. Not to mention that his presence at the Uchiha massacre was known by the entire village by now, he reasoned. Naruto may be a kid, but he knew about the wonders of the gossip society. Once a secret was out in the open, it wouldn't take too long for the entire village to know about it. What if they start asking questions? The blonde didn't want to think about how he'd explain what happened, but he knew people would ask questions once they saw the difference in his eyes. At the Hokage's office. It was already night time in Konoha and the village was lights were all over the place. Friends meeting at the bars, boyfriend and girlfriend having dinner, and families enjoying themselves as they walked throughout the village streets. The shinobi population, albeit those who weren't sent on missions, were enjoying themselves at a special place owned by an ex-chunin. The only person that was working thus late was the Hokage himself. Actually, he already dealt with the dreaded paperwork of the day and he was just kicking back on his chair while smoking his pipe. The Hokage was only waiting for a meeting before he would retire for the night. The only problem, though, was that the meeting was to be held a couple hours ago and the old man wasn't so thrilled about the man's annoying habit of always being late. The old man was surprised, though, when the very person he was expecting barged in his office while reading an orange book. You're 2 hours late, Kakashi-kun. What gives? Asked Sarutobi, already expecting the Junin to give some silly excuse just for him to pardon the Junin and move on. I'm sorry, Hokage-sama, but this old lady needed some help with her groceries and I had to help her, explained Kakashi, while never once taking his eyes away from the book, even going as much as turn the page. Sarutobi, for his part, smiled at the man's antics. I'm glad you're preventing this village from the usual D-ranked missions income, Kakashi. Now I called you here for one reason and one reason only. You do know what Uchiha Itachi was capable of doing that night, didn't you? Asked Sarutobi, before he saw a nod, allowing him to continue. What you don't know is that Itachi, while not outright killed his little brother, he used a terrible genjutsu on his little brother Sasuke, overloading his brain, ultimately killing him. Also, just as Itachi was about to flee the area, he managed to hit a Kaden attack on little Uzumaki Naruto's face, damaging his entire eyes, rendering them useless, said Sarutobi, waiting for a while as Kakashi processed the information, before he continued. The boy is fine, though we had to make a transplant, using Uchiha Sasuke's eyes. Understood. So Itachi did kill his entire clan. Then, I've received some reports from my Anbu peers about him. They always considered him unstable beneath the usual stoic demeanor he always showed. Nevertheless, I fail to see why you're telling me this and why you needed me here, asked Kakashi, earning a nod from the old man as he smoked his pipe. You're indeed right, and the very reason of your presence here is because of what happened today at the hospital, explained Hiruzen, while seeing the Junin's attention. When the doctor unwrapped Naruto's eyes, instead of seeing Sasuke's usual black ones in Naruto's sockets, blood-red ones appeared with one Tomo ring around the retina. In other words, concluded Sarutobi as Kakashi was displaying a shocked demeanor while processing the entire information. Naruto is now the sole possessor of the true Sharingan eye. Kakashi already concluded this before the old man opened his mouth, but somehow hearing it was even harder. Kakashi himself was a victim to the Sharingan transplant, but while his was only one eye, it appears that Naruto received both. Hokage-sama, how is his Sharingan? I mean, in my case, I can't activate or deactivate, but, asked Kakashi, earning a nod from the Hokage as he expected this question. His is just like any other Uchiha, I'm afraid. He was able to deactivate in front of me once I told him how to do it. This is a serious matter, Kakashi, and since you and little Naruto share the same story, I figured you'd be best fit to handle an S-ranked mission I will assign, explained Hokage, while getting behind his table in order to grab a scroll and then hand to Kakashi. As the silver-haired Junin opened the scroll, Hiruzen thought best to explain the situation. This will be a long-term mission, Kakashi, and the high rank is so that you will be granted with enough money for both of you out there. Seeing as now you're the only one who can teach him how to use the Dujutsu, it's imperative that he learn how to. But why out of the village and why a full year? I could very well teach him inside the village. Is there something else there, besides training him, isn't it? Asked Kakashi, before he saw the old man sighing in sadness, as the sudden old age finally reached him and he wished another one would do this job in his stead. News of the blonde's presence at the Uchiha massacre reached the entire village, I'm afraid. There won't be long until people starts blaming him for what happened and demand his execution, just like they've been trying since he was born. Keeping him inside the village is already a burden, and now that he is the sole barrier of the Sharingan eye, I wouldn't be surprised if those ignorant fools accused Naruto of stealing the prized Dujutsu and used it to destroy the village. That's so. I'm sending you with him to a training trip so that he can learn the aspects of the Sharingan as well as the ability to defend himself in the future. Meanwhile, I will be able to better control the information and eventually relay the truth by the time you two arrive, explained the Hokage, earning a contemplative nod from Kakashi. What should I teach him, then? I'm assuming he has some sort of introduction at the academy, asked Kakashi, earning a nod from the Hokage. Naruto has some knowledge when chakra is involved, but both his taijutsu and his accuracy needs work, which I'm sure the Dujutsu will correct. If not, then with practice he could improve greatly. He has difficulty controlling his chakra, simply because the boy has plenty stocked. His Sharingan is in its first stage right now, and by the time he comes back, I figure him to advance to stage 2. Taijutsu, chakra control and weapon accuracy will be his prime subjects. Weapon usage can also be applied, but I'll leave that to you to choose. The usual 3 academy jutsus, he already knows, although the Bunshin no Jutsu was ever completed, most likely because the technique requires so little chakra and he ends overloading the clone, thus failing miserably. I have my reservations regarding elemental ninjutsu, but if you feel that he's ready, then by all means do so. I don't know if he has an affinity yet, but here is a couple of chakra papers for you to give him later on, explained the Hokage, earning a nod from Kakashi. I'll have someone make some shopping for suitable new clothes, kunais, shurikens, first aid kits and some steel wire. Anything else you think it's wise for the trip? Asked the Hokage as Kakashi's hand was holding his chin in a thinking position. Some weights would be nice to build his physique a little bit and up his speed a little bit. Probably 5, 10 and 15 pound weights for each limb as he progresses, added Kakashi, earning a nod from the Hokage as he wrote the last item of things to buy. Tomorrow, He'll come by my office and I plan to tell him about the trip. It's imperative that you leave as soon as possible tomorrow. Kakashi, do you hear me? Ordered Hiruzen, to which Kakashi nodded, before proceeding for the door straight for the library, where he would have to gather material for his new student. Kakashi had to curse this situation. Every time he got a team of genins, he would fail them, mostly because he would expect them to figure out his puzzle, and in the end, no team ever did. However, as training a boy now became a mission, he just couldn't do anything about it. Oh well, at least I'll be able to concentrate on my reading, now that I don't have to worry about going on tough assignments, thought Kakashi as he landed right in front of Konoha Public Library. Strange, though, was that the silver-haired Junin was actually looking forward to seeing what little Naruto could do. The Sharingan added with limitless chakra supply, the boy could become a ninjutsu specialist. After leaving the hospital, Naruto went straight to his apartment, where he lied on the ground, wondering about the images that now plagued his mind constantly. The Hokage so kindly explained to him that what happened in the past must remain as such. But how could he? What he saw, at least what Sasuke saw, was nothing short of hell on earth, and the blonde's mind kept playing over and over again, like some kind of twisted game. Looking at the clock in his house, the blonde sighed in dismay, seeing as he had to go to the Hokage's office in exactly 2 hours. He didn't want to leave the floor, though. The worst thing of this entire situation that it wasn't caused by a monster or a demon, but a human being. To this time, Naruto just couldn't understand this Uchiha Itachi for having the hearts to do something like this, and doesn't even show remorse afterward. As he got up from the floor and looked at the mirror located in his room, he focused some chakra on his eye region, before the bloody red eyes with one tome appeared. Just the sight alone made Naruto remember Itachi's eyes, and frightened wasn't a word that could describe the blonde, more like he was afraid for his life. But, what am I doing right now? Wasn't it me who kept screaming to Hokage Jichin that I would be the best ninja ever? Wasn't I the one who wished for his seat in the future? So why can't I stop thinking about something that didn't even happen to me in the first place? Suddenly, a new resolve bombarded his brain as he looked at the mirror once more. Whatever joke someone up there planned for him wouldn't work. These eyes were his now, and no matter what happens now or in the future, it wouldn't change. The blonde was so excited about this that he didn't even notice that he was standing, instead of sulking on the ground. The blonde admitted knowing next to nothing about the Sharingan Dujutsu, especially because he didn't pay that much attention at the academy, but that would certainly change. Looking at the clock, he was startled by the fact that more than an hour passed ever since he began sulking, and he was late to meet the Hokage, considering how fast an academy student travels and the fact that he didn't possess large legs to compensate for his lack of speed. At the Hokage's office Sarutobi Hiruzen was calmly passing through all those goddamn mission and budget reports that needed his analysis, although the man was certain that the majority of these documents only served to pile up the work he needed to do, because it wouldn't change whether he approved or not. Issues like signing a trade agreement that already happened, or shinobi missions that were issued by the council, without his approval, that were already carried out. Of course, those missions were just errands that the council member chooses to delegate to genin teams or lone chunin because, apparently, they have too much work, but Sarutobi knew better. Those two became lazy in old age, and they thought that as members of the council, they could sit back and relax while he, the Hokage, got stuck with all the work. Sometimes I wonder why I keep this damn council up and running. Certainly, the only thing they do, and very good a job at that, is to give bureaucratic excuses for not doing what they should be doing, aiding me in running the village. Just as he was about to pick another report to read, before signing it, his door opened with force before Naruto appeared with his hands on top of his knees as he was trying to recover some air. Hiruzen looked at the blonde panting in front of him and instantly remembered that he was indeed supposed to be here in order for the Hokage to explain what will happen to the blonde and what he would be doing for 1 year. Nevertheless, since he wasn't expecting Kakashi to arrive on time, Naruto would have to wait a bit. However, and much to Hiruzen squeezing his eyes to see if he was dreaming, the man in question suddenly emerged from the door while reading that book of his. It's impossible. No, it's got to be an illusion. It can't be. Kai. The old man was in denial, and Kakashi was actually enjoying his shocked look on the Hokage's face. He thought about being late once more and get a rise out of the old man, but then he had the idea to do just the opposite and see the man's look of pure shock. Naruto, in the meantime, was wondering about the situation at hand. A man he never knew just entered in the office and the Hokage was showing an incredulous face, making him wonder what was wrong. Ah, Jichin, what's going on? You wanted to see me. The old man wouldn't budge, though, as he looked the silver-haired Junin, much to Kakashi's hidden laughter. The Hokage was still in denial about the whole thing. Suddenly, Hiruzen cleared his throat, before focusing his attention on the blonde, despite the fact that Kakashi being on time for once clearly did damage to his brain. Oh, Naruto. Right. Well, guess you're now aware of the fact that you possess one of Konoha's most famous and equally powerful dojutsu. However, because of you not being an Uchiha, you don't yet possess the skills necessary to use it accordingly. This man behind you is called Hitaki Kakashi and he's one of our elite Junins. Naruto turned to meet this Kakashi, but the entire time he was focusing on the book, just waving his hand to the blonde, greeting him. After both greeted each other, Hiruzen turned to explain once more. Kakashi here happens to possess experience in using the eye to its fullest capacity. As such, I just assigned him to train you in this department. You two will be leaving the village and travel to a place 10 miles away from here. Any questions? The blonde was looking at the aged Hokage as if the man had two heads all of a sudden. What is this about really? Why would he have to leave the village in order to train? Doesn't Konoha have hundreds of available training grounds? Many questions passed inside his mind immediately and he wanted nothing more than answer from them all. Nevertheless, he reasoned that leaving the village for a while would actually be good for him to sort things out a bit and even learns what he needed to know about his new eyes. I have just one question, Jichin. Just how much time will this trip take? Naruto asked. 1 year will be more than adequate for Kakashi here to drill any valuable information there is to know about the Sharingan, including helping you improve in some areas he finds you needs room for improvement. Both Sarutobi and Kakashi knew the boy wanted to ask more questions, but since the blonde didn't verbalize them, they wouldn't pry. The blonde, for instance, nodded at the assignment and turned to the Junin in question. Okay then, Kakashi-san, when and where do we leave? Kakashi smiled at his new student and closed his book, before addressing the blonde. Meet me at the West Gate in 2 hours, don't bother in packing anything, I got everything you're going to need sealed in a scroll in my possession. The blonde nodded, before saying his goodbye to the Hokage and leaving the room towards his apartment. Meanwhile, both Kakashi and Hiruzen were having a conversation about the blonde's attitude and sudden reservation of asking whatever bugged his mind. Something's wrong here, Hokage-sama. For what you said, he wouldn't wait 5 seconds before he bombarded you with questions, Kakashi asked with clear curiosity. However, the Hokage's sudden realization caused the man to sigh in dismay. I feared this, Kakashi. When Naruto received the eyes, unfortunately, he received Uchiha Sasuke's last vision before he was dead, meaning the blonde is the sole witness of the massacre. Because of this, whereas before he would be ecstatic at the idea of training, now he appears more reserved as in doubting my word. I don't know, Kakashi, if giving Naruto and Uchiha's eyes was such a good idea, but then wouldn't be better than him being blind, isn't it? Kakashi could very well see that the Hokage was wondering about his choice more than he wanted an answer to his rhetorical question. I don't know, Hokage-sama. However, Naruto won't be like this forever. I mean, it was just yesterday his entire world changed and just now is he coming in terms with it. With time, I believe he'll return to his normal, albeit of course more reserved, behavior. Until then, though, he's mine to work him to the ground. Once a month I'll be sending reports on his status. I'm sure hope you're right, Kakashi, just seeing that usually cheerful demeanor getting crumbled by one of my top elite Anbu members. You may go now, Kakashi, and please train him to best of your ability. I'll be waiting for the monthly reports, Hokage said, before Kakashi bowed and left the room. At the West Gate . Hitaki Kakashi was reading his book as he waited for his student to arrive at the West Gate. Strapped on his back was a huge scroll which carried everything Naruto would need throughout the year. Thinking about what the Hokage said, Kakashi couldn't shake the fact that Naruto's entire personality was stripped from him just because of the eye transplant. However, the boy's uncharacteristically reversion demeanor was indeed disturbing to say the least. The silver-haired Junin was considering if Naruto would become just like all of the Uchihas, stuck up, egoistical and arrogant. Taking his attention away from the book, Kakashi looked at the approaching figure as he studied the blonde for a while. Nothing about the blonde showed to Kakashi that he was seeing a kid approaching him. Naruto approached him with calculated footsteps, calculated breathings. In other words, the blonde was walking like he was expecting something to happen if his eyes looking around were any indication. Ready to go, Naruto. We're going to be away for 1 year, so say your goodbye to the village for now, Kakashi said. Naruto nodded before looking backwards. The village he was born in, the village he loved with all his heart, the village that stroked the worst pain of all, and no such thing will wipe that fateful memory from his mind. The blonde just hoped that within the year, he would learn to cope with what happened, even though it didn't happen to him directly. As ready as I'll ever be, Kakashi-sensei. And so, the two traveled by foot towards the place where they would live for the entire year. The entire path was filled by trees, and Kakashi could very well arrive at the location in 10 minutes by hopping on trees, but the man figured Naruto didn't have the body or the stamina to choose this sort of transportation, so they kept on walking. It didn't matter, though, as Kakashi estimated close to an hour trip. The place they are heading to was a secluded cottage next to river and surrounded by a forest, in other words, perfect for Kakashi to train Naruto in every aspect of the way, bearing from pure stamina exercises to, quite possibly, elemental ninjutsu if he judges the blonde capable of in the future. As the two walked, little to no conversation was being shared. Naruto was silent, observing the path around them, and Kakashi was busy half focusing on his book and on the blonde next to him. Kakashi was considering the fact that at least he wouldn't have to worry about teaching the blonde how to pay attention to his surroundings, since by observing his behavior, Kakashi could tell that the blonde would narrow his sight in concentration at any noise caused, even if it was just animals going around with their lives or something like that. Kakashi's attention was finally broken when Naruto turned to address him, Sharingan already ablaze in his once onyx black eyes. Kakashi-sensei, can I ask you something? The silver-haired Junin just nodded. Looking around with the Sharingan eye, I've noticed that I could see people's movements before they actually begin. Is this the Sharingan is all about? If Kakashi was shocked by the sudden question, he wasn't showing it. The truth was that while he didn't know Naruto was experimenting with the Dujutsu, the blonde, maybe on a subconscious level, understands the very concept of the kaleidoscope eye. Partially true. Yes, the Sharingan has many attributes, and one of them is certainly to predict one's movements before he or she actually makes them. Naruto, getting a grasp of the eye's theory will be our first target, since it's imperial that you understand everything there is to know about the weapon you now have in your eyes, but I'll give you a crash course about the Sharingan and its levels. First, is the level you're in right now with only Tomo in each eye. Within this form, you can partially predict movements as well as see the opponent's chakra array, albeit a little bit blur. Only after the second stage of the Sharingan, with composes of 2 Tomo in each eye, would you be able to fully visualize the opponent's chakra flux and composition. Within the second level, the Sharingan can then copy the hand signs as well as how much chakra is needed for either ninjutsu or genjutsu. Finally, the third level, which of course, is composed of 3 Tomo in each eye, is when an Uchiha is complete and no technique escapes from the eye's copying ability. Also, as your Sharingan develops, your speed will certainly increase simply because you'd be one step ahead of every move your opponent makes. Naruto was listening intently to the lecture as he processed the information. Right now, he was at level 1, meaning that he could predict movement to a certain aspect and be aware when a chakra-based attack would come. It's both mine and Hokage-sama's expectation that within the end of our trip, you'll reach the second level of the Sharingan. However, that doesn't mean you cannot reach the third level if we work you hard enough. We'll be focusing on stamina exercises to improve your muscles and chakra-related exercises in order to maintain your Sharingan active for longer periods of time. Not to mention the usual skills a ninja should possess like weapon accuracy, stealth and agility. Also, the Sandaime gave me permission to teach you more advanced abilities like the Uchiha Taijutsu style called Setsuju Ryu, Intercepting Fist, and even Elemental Jutsu, but the latter will only occur if I judge you worthy of such power being so young. But that's a problem for another time. For now, we'll focus on getting used with the Dujutsu and train your body accordingly as well. The blonde nodded, and while very curious about what the man meant by elemental jutsus, he figured that it would be explained with time. After that, Silence soon reigned the conversation until both arrived at their designated place where they would spend an entire year training. Naruto took a moment to look around and was fascinated by the fact that a medium-sized waterfall was a few meters away from the good-looking, albeit rather simple, cottage near the lake. Not that looks matter to the blonde, since any accommodation would be far better than the apartment he resides in Konoha. Upon entering, Naruto was surprised about the cottage's decoration. It was reduced to a single couch and 2 beds on the far left corner. The kitchen, or at least the blonde considered to be a kitchen, had nothing more than a small refrigerator with a stove next to it, strapped to a small wood dining table with 2 wooden chairs. Kakashi, for his part, never been here, so he was surprised as well. Nonetheless, he left his backpack and the scroll on the couch, before opening the fridge in order to see what's inside, before noticing that it was empty. However, when he placed the hand inside, he was surprised that it was cool. I didn't know that this place had any electricity at all. Oh well, it's not like there is a grocery store nearby to buy some food. Closing the fridge, he looked back to see Naruto inspecting the huge scroll lying on the couch. I'm sure it's a great idea to see what's inside, so why don't you roll it on the ground, so that I can teach you a vital skill a ninja should have about sealing scrolls. Naruto nodded, before complying with the request as he rolled the scroll on the ground all the way. He was surprised that the scroll's length took almost the entire cottage, but he turned to Kakashi nonetheless, waiting for the man to explain what he'd be learning right now. This chakra art is called fuinjutsu, and while it's nowadays considered a lost art, just about every shinobi I know uses either scrolls for sealing objects like weapons or even to summon the elements of nature. Sealing objects inside the scroll is very easy, just as it's useful skill to learn. In order to do that, you just open this sealing scroll and place the desired object on top of the markings in the middle of the seal. Any fuinjutsu master would be able to draw this markings in a blank scroll, but since they already sells sealing scrolls, we won't waste time learning how to draw the seal array. After you position the object in the middle of the scroll, all you have to do is to focus your chakra on the seal and it will do the rest. Give it a try with this scroll here first. After the explanation, Naruto took the scroll and picked up a shuriken Kakashi gave to him, before he did like he was told. After placing the shuriken in the middle of the scroll, he made the rat hand seal and began on focusing chakra on the seal. For a while, nothing happened, until a smoke suddenly replaced the shuriken and a specific kanji appeared in the middle of the sealing array, meaning that Naruto was successful, much to Kakashi's smile. Okay Naruto, now that you've learned how to seal objects, you'll be responsible for unsealing every object that's sealed in the scroll I brought. As you'll notice, the scroll has several sealing arrays written, instead of only one, which means that for each sealing array, there is an object sealed inside. By unsealing it, you'll have to do the same thing, but one for each sealing array. Try using your Sharingan as well. This will serve to better adapt your chakra control by focusing on using chakra in both points, your eyes and the scroll. Then, as Kakashi picked up some sort of notebook, presumably to figure out Naruto's training for the year, the blonde started unsealing the lengthy scroll splattered on the warm wooden floor. The first sealing array revealed a couple of books and some minor scrolls, before Naruto remembered that he was supposed to know everything there is to know about the Sharingan, so he moved to the next and so on. By the end of it all, he could see boxes of projectiles like shuriken and kunais, new set of clothes, training weights, a huge stack of fruits and vegetables. Apparently instant ramen was too much to bring, huh? Closing parenthesis. What surprised Naruto the most, though, was the last item he unsealed. A stack of 2 swords, maybe wakizashis by the size of them, but Naruto could easily see that both of them were special. One carried a dark menacing yellow holster and the other one carried a bloody red holster, and the blonde could read one inscription in each of the swords, but before he could read, Kakashi appeared explaining to him. They are called Tora and Doragon Naruto. By the holster color, you can identify which one is it. As you can see, this smaller blade is called a wakizashi, and while it's not as strong as a katana, it's faster and more open to maneuvers. To a samurai, a katana would be preferable, since they rely on strength, but for a ninja who relies more on speed, shorter blades like these in front of you are better utilized to our purpose. Sandaime-sama did also allow me to teach you to a few kenjutsu styles to go along with them, but that will also depend on whether I believe you're ready for it, just like elemental ninjutsu. Now, Why don't you change your clothes and meet me outside for our first day of training? The blonde chose, instead, to admire the blades in front of him as Kakashi quite expected him to do. Naruto may have changed his attitude, turning into a more reserved individual, but even so, he was only 9 years old and as such he was easily impressed by the look of things. Afterwards, the blonde picked up his new set of clothing and went to change immediately. Naruto was surprised when he looked at himself after getting changed. The clothes looked rather simple, however it managed to fit him rather nicely. He was now wearing black Anbu pants with blue sandals and a navy blue t-shirt, but what surprised him was that apart from his old clothes, this one was much lighter and his movements were much lighter than it was before. Upon leaving the cottage, he spotted Kakashi in the middle of the clearing, while reading that book of his. As the blonde approached, curiosity started to fill his mind as he took a closer look to the book. The name Ica Ica Paradise was somewhat familiar to the blonde as he found one copy inside the Hokage's desk, and while Naruto didn't read it, he certainly found strange that the majority of the male population had a copy of this book. Upon arriving, Kakashi broke the concentration from the book and looked at the blonde in front of him. In order to keep the Sharingan activated during a fight, both your chakra and your stamina must be perfectly tuned. Being that said, until I say otherwise, you'll keep your Sharingan active all the time whether you're training your stamina or your chakra. So, we'll be starting by adding 5 pounds to each of your limbs as you go through some physical exercises. For now you'll run around this training field 20 times, before you'll complete 50 push-ups and sit-ups. Now, activate your Sharingan and get started, Kakashi explained, before the blonde positioned the weights and started running around the training field. The weights were nothing to come by at first, but upon the blonde's 10th lap, his muscles were beginning to get rigid by the pace. Nevertheless, he just kept on going with the notion that he would get stronger because of this. The Uchiha massacre did little to drive Naruto's dream away from him, and his desire to become a ninja like the Sandaime and Yondaime Hokage remained. By the end of the running, the blonde was panting slightly, but he started the next exercises by lying down on the ground and began the push-ups. Kakashi was watching everything with a smile on his face at the blonde's drive and determination. He knew the first time using weights was tough on anyone, simply because no one is accustomed to the sudden added body weight. However, the blonde just kept the exercise going, even though it was evident to the silver-haired Junin that Naruto was feeling pain on his muscles by now. After the last sit-up, Naruto was in front of Kakashi, breathing with difficulty as it was expected. Good work, Naruto. These 3 exercises will be done every morning until I see that you got used to it. In time, we'll increase the weights and the number of repetitions. Now, we'll practice your taijutsu. The Uchiha's intercepting fist is an unique style and can only be used by predicting the opponent's moves. In other words, your movements would have to be made before the opponent starts his movement. Any questions? Kakashi explained, before Naruto nodded. Understood. However, if the style is like you said, then without the Sharingan it's pretty much useless, right? What if for some reason, I can't use the Sharingan and have to protect myself? Naruto asked, followed by a smile from Kakashi. Granted that the Uchiha created this taijutsu style only to rely on the Sharingan, however the dojutsu isn't the only way for you to anticipate your opponent. With enough experience, Shinobi's instinct proves to be a major asset in battle, meaning that your experience shows you the move before the enemy proceeds. You'll be trained in both ways, using your Sharingan and not using it. Now, I'll attack you using low speed so that you can see the attack and move to defend it. Afterwards, I'll give you a scroll about the intercepting fist for you to memorize the katas. As Naruto fell into the academy standard taijutsu style, Kakashi immediately set himself to attacking the little blonde slowly so that he could get a feel of the Sharingan in the midst of battle. At night. A few hours later, Naruto was sore from head to toe and he wanted nothing more than just sleep for a whole day. Kakashi followed after the blonde inside the cottage as they prepared their beds in order to go to bed. After the taijutsu program, Naruto started reading the scroll which detailed the Uchiha's taijutsu style, but fatigue soon reached him and he couldn't read more than 15 minutes, before his eyes were started to close without his will. Kakashi had the intention of conversing with Naruto about his training, but when he looked at the blonde, unsurprisingly, Naruto was already fast asleep, which earned a smile from Kakashi, since he knew that this would happen constantly. Kakashi admitted that 1 year would only serve to teach Naruto the basics and nothing more, so he intensified the training regimen in order for Naruto to be considered genin level by the time the year ended. Suddenly, the man's senses alerted him of an intruder in the vicinity, before he left the cottage. Once outside, Kakashi was face to face with the person who initiated all this mess. Full Anbu gear and the weasel mask on his face, Uchiha Itachi was standing there as in waiting for Kakashi to leave the cottage. The strange thing, though, was that Kakashi wasn't intimidated by the last Uchiha, and that was suspicious in its own terms. Greetings, Kakashi-senpai. Can we talk? Far from here. I can't risk being exposed right now. The silver-haired Junin acquiesced with the Anbu's request, before both vanished from sight and appeared a couple of meters far from the cottage, since Kakashi couldn't leave Naruto alone in there. You went beyond what was expected, Itachi. Sasuke didn't deserve this fate, and certainly not Naruto. It's a miracle that the transfer procedure was a success, otherwise he would be blind right now. Kakashi's tone holds no malice against Itachi, but the facts alone carried a stronger punch on his face. Ever since the attack on the Uchiha, Itachi's consciousness was beating him like a rag doll, but he couldn't take it away anymore. He never meant to deliver this fate for his little brother, nor would he attack Naruto if he knew it was him who appeared that day. I carried my mission with utmost efficiency, Kakashi-senpai. The Uchiha clan's plans for a coup would soon come into fruition, and they would be using the demon sealed in Naruto-kun to destroy everything in their path. Regarding my little brother, though, my intentions were for him to despise me, to hate me so that he wouldn't come to me seeking revenge, but unfortunately, I haven't anticipated that his brain wouldn't be able to take the sudden overload of the Tsukuyomi. As to Naruto, I was so engrossed on the mission that I didn't pay attention to my surroundings, and when a shadow appeared by the Uchiha's courtyard, I moved by sheer instinct, and the results you already know. As Kakashi listened to it all, he noticed that Itachi's rather stoic voice was beginning to change, and he sensed a great deal of regret in it. The silver-haired Junin sighed in dismay at the sudden consequences of Itachi's mission, but there was nothing more to do now. What's done is done, and nothing would change. Unfortunately, we can't do anything to change the past, Itachi. It took great courage from your part to do what was needed, but surely the brain overload you're suffering right now is huge. You need to rest a bit and recover, Kakashi said. The weasel masked shinobi nodded and was about to leave, before he looked at the cottage and then turned to Kakashi. Don't make him too dependent on the Sharingan, Kakashi. The only reason my family was killed was because they were blinded by what the Dujutsu told them. Naruto-kun has a bright future ahead of him and can very well be a force to be recognized within a few years of hard work. Also, I've been meaning to warn Konoha about an organization out there after the nine-tailed beasts, and I'm afraid Naruto will be targeted in the future. I trust that you have some sort of secure communication system with Hokage-sama in order to relay the information, right? The organization's name is Akatsuki, and its leader just asked me to join, which I accepted only to spy on them. I'll keep in touch Kakashi to know about him and to relay information about when the organization is after Naruto-kun, Itachi said, with his back towards Kakashi, thus not seeing the look of surprise shown by the copy nin. Naruto is a special case, so don't worry about it. For someone who grew up accustomed to the village's hatred and with the images of the Uchiha massacre on his head, there is little that could drive him away from his dream of protecting the village he so cares about. I understand your concern, and you have my word that I'll drill this thought into his mind if I have to. Nevertheless, I shall warn Hokage-sama of this organization via my summons. There's no one more reliable than them. I will have to increase the blonde's training, then. If some organization will be after him in the future, he needs to be prepared for it. Must appreciate it, Itachi. Until next time we meet. Itachi nodded, before leaving in a shunshin, as Kakashi arrived inside the cottage once more. Seeing as Naruto was still sleeping, Kakashi decided to follow him, thus lying on his bed and closing his eyes for tomorrow. Nevertheless, the sudden knowledge of a powerful organization out there which is after Naruto, even if indirectly, surely poses a significant threat to the blonde's well-being. Also the fact that Itachi would be on its members, somehow Kakashi knew that the members' level would be similar or maybe even higher than the Uchiha prodigy. No doubt, Sandame needed to hear this. The next day After Naruto finished the warming exercises, which were still hard by the way, the blonde was being trained in target practice by Kakashi as well as some other skills like stealth and agility. Kakashi was surprised that even though the blonde's throwing skills wasn't still top-notch, he managed to hit the target 8 out of 10 shurikens and 7 out of 10 kunais. The most surprising was that the Sharingan wasn't active. Kakashi wondered why Naruto's skills with projectiles weren't listed in his file, but he paid it no mind. Naruto. Very good. With a few tips and the Sharingan, you'll be able to hit every target with ease. So, let's try again, only this time try to loosen up your wrist a bit. The movement has to be swift and precise, so by applying too much force to the throw and the projectile won't maintain a straight path like you intended. Naruto nodded and did as he was told, activating the Sharingan and focusing on the target in front. This time, although he improved, getting 9 out of 10 shurikens and 8 out of 10 kunais, Kakashi just knew Naruto could hit them all on target with enough practice. We'll keep doing this for a while and then we'll move on to moving targets, okay, explained Kakashi. Kakashi didn't explain to him, but by keeping the Sharingan active throughout the entire ordeal did wonders to his chakra control, and in no time, Naruto would be able to learn the first exercise a genin must do, which was the tree walking exercise. After the projectiles training, Naruto moved on to agility practice, which consisted of dodging wooden shurikens thrown by Kakashi. By focusing chakra to his legs, Naruto learned that he could increase his speed and evade the projectiles, but that did little to escape from Kakashi's precise projectiles, but the fact that some of them missed, Kakashi was satisfied with the improvement. Naruto. Pay attention at the shurikens in order to learn their trajectory. You can't hope to evade them if you don't know where they would hit. The blonde was beginning to consider Kakashi a slave driver, but no once did he complain at the training. He was feeling his muscles pulsing in slight pain, although it was less painful than the first time. Naruto's movements were still restricted by the weight attached to his limbs. He looked forward and saw that 3 shurikens flew towards the position he would land, and he smirked once the Sharingan detailed their trajectory. Landing one of his feet on the ground, he focused some chakra and managed to change directions, before the shurikens flew past him and hit the tree instead, much to Kakashi's smile. Good job. Now what will you do once I increase the number of projectiles, say 10 for instance? Kakashi didn't even wait for a response as he appeared with 5 in each hand before throwing all of them at Naruto. At first, panic reached the blonde from not knowing what to do against the attack, but then he realized that by doing this, he'd never get this exercise done, so he focused on the image the Sharingan displayed, before calculating each shuriken's designated target. His mind alerted him to the fact that all projectiles aimed for a specific part of his body. With a swift move, Naruto rolled to the left, before he saw the shuriken pass through him, without posing any danger. However, the blonde was ill-prepared when Kakashi appeared behind him and placed deadly kunai just inches from his jugular. Good job once more, however this is one lesson you have to carry with you every day. You must pay attention to your surroundings at all times. Shurikens are sometimes used for distraction and the opponent could only wait until you dodge them, before attacking when you're occupied. I'll be doing this from time to time to see how your perception of danger is tuned. Now, let's get some lunch, I'm starving, how about you? The silver-haired Junin smiled at the blonde's stomach, suddenly voicing his opinion, and the fact that Naruto blushed in embarrassment only proved to increase the man's laughter, much to the blonde's chagrin, as he muttered some curse words. During lunchtime, Kakashi thought about talking to Naruto, outside of training, to get a feel of the blonde's thoughts right now. He was surprised, though, that Naruto was using this time out of the village in order to ease his thoughts on the manner. Naruto talked about everything that happened since that fateful day and opened up to Kakashi that the memory was quite overwhelming to swallow, but he also felt confident that with time, he would learn how to cope, a thought shared by Kakashi, who in turn assured the blonde that he would help in any way he could and that Naruto could always talk to him about it. Thank you, Kakashi-sensei, but I believe just the time outside the village will be enough to sort things out. So what's left on the agenda for today? Kakashi smiled at his student's endless determination. Surely, this year will be very interesting. 1 month later. What at first started slow just for Kakashi to get a grip of Naruto's skills, 1 month later, the blonde's skills skyrocketed. With the Sharingan, Naruto managed to learn the taijutsu style with utmost efficiency as his speed nearly doubled since they started the training. His physical workout doubled as well, with the blonde now carrying 10 pounds per limb and doing twice the workout. Right now, Kakashi was testing Naruto in a taijutsu match where he would increase the pace to a genin level fight. He was surprised how much the blonde improved since the start. Right now, they were fighting with a kunai in hand as Kakashi saw that Naruto was quite adept to using small blades in a fight. Suddenly, they met each other on the air as the weapons clashed with one another, resonating a much peculiar sound. Both Naruto and Kakashi landed on the ground, before doing backflips. Instantly, both of them picked shurikens and threw at each other, before meeting in the middle. There was a reason Kakashi and Naruto were moving alike, and that was because this is the exact nature of the intercepting fist, to act before the opponent have the chance to. The fight lasted for half an hour before Naruto dropped on the ground panting in exhaustion. He was able to maintain the Sharingan for a longer period of time, but still wasn't enough. Don't worry, Naruto. As the Dujutsu evolves, you'll be more accustomed with it, meaning you won't spend too much chakra keeping it active. Now, take 5 and I'll teach you a new chakra control exercise, Kakashi said. The silver-haired Junin smiled at the blonde in front of him as he imagined how much he grew from 1 month. His muscles were certainly more defined and his stamina increased, meaning he could maintain a taijutsu fight against a Junin-level shinobi while at the same time focusing chakra on his eyes. Kakashi was certain that the blonde wouldn't have much of a problem with the tree-walking exercise, since maintaining the Sharingan active is the same principle. Kakashi-sensei, I was wondering about something, Naruto said, gathering his sensei's attention. During our fight, for a minute or two, the Sharingan showed me your moves before you performed them. But that wouldn't happen after it went to the second level, right? Kakashi pondered for a while to give the answer for Naruto. He didn't know if Naruto was on the verge of evolving his Sharingan or the fact that he was pumping more chakra to his eyes than necessary, thus giving him a better vision. Nevertheless, he figured that both situations would end up evolving his Sharingan, so he showed a smile to the blonde. If what you said is true, Naruto, then your Sharingan has entered in the process of evolution. You did read a part of the book I gave you that detailed the exact time of the Sharingan's evolution. In your case, you'll begin to see the effects of the second-level Dujutsu, until it finally evolves. Congratulations, Kakashi said with a smile on his face as he saw Naruto smiling as well. With the second-level Sharingan, you'll be able to move on to the ninjutsu and genjutsu portion of this training. Now the exercise I'm about to teach you is called tree climbing exercise. Quote. The look of pure confusion appeared in the blonde's face and he questioned if there was someone at his age not able to climb trees. Kakashi saw his doubt and explained. I know what you'll say, as others already asked before. You won't learn how to simply climb trees, but rather climb without the use of your hand. Like this. Kakashi focused chakra on his feet and began walking up the tree on his side, much to Naruto's surprised demeanor. After he dropped to the ground, he turned to Naruto once more to explain. You can do this by focusing chakra to your feet in order to stick your feet at the tree's hard structure. Use a kunai to mark your progress, okay. Oh, and one more thing, you won't be using the Sharingan for this. Why not? Naruto asked. Remember what I taught you, Naruto. The Sharingan is nothing but a tool at your disposal, you cannot become too dependent on it to the point where you can't do anything without it. Now, get moving. The little blonde nodded now without question and deactivated the Sharingan. Since they started this training, Kakashi would repeat the sentence, look underneath the underneath, as it was his mantra. He explained that in order to develop a shinobi's mind, one must always look beyond appearances, ask questions when needed and seek answers when possible. The Sharingan is nothing but a tool, he said. To Naruto, this concept wasn't foreign at all, but maybe there was something there his sensei wanted him to figure out. Kakashi had enough experience under his belt to know that in theory the Sharingan is obviously an Uchiha's tool to overcome the opponent, but when practice is involved, it wouldn't be that simple. Perhaps something happens in the future that Naruto needs to watch out for. So far, nothing of the sort happened, but if Kakashi said so, then is need for the blonde's concern. In Konoha 1 month passed since Naruto left with Kakashi and Sarutobi was satisfied with the first report. Kakashi was now focusing on building taijutsu and stamina, also focusing on his weapon throwing skills and agility as well. His Sharingan wasn't yet evolved to the second stage, but Kakashi was confident that Naruto could reach in another month or two. Hiruzen was reluctant to allow Kakashi to teach Kenjutsu to Naruto, but he was certain that the man had his reasons to think of such skills and the Hokage trusted Kakashi to do the right thing. Regarding the boy's training, Sarutobi couldn't be more pleased. Regarding about his reputation, though, was a different matter entirely. The population already knew that the blonde was present at the Uchiha massacre and they were demanding answers to the probable cause of the Kyuubi being behind all this, even though it was clear to the Hokage and the Anbu that Naruto was only wandering around before he was hit in the face by Itachi's fire attack. Hiruzen could very well relay this information to the population, but it wouldn't take long until they realize Naruto isn't blind and figure out the truth. Another fact that clearly bothered Hiruzen was this new organization Akatsuki, which is after the tailed beasts, like the one residing inside Naruto. Certainly, precautions must be made in order to assure Naruto's survival, however, without much information to rely on, there was no way he could make a proper assessment. Certainly, he would need someone who could dig the information through the entire elemental nations, and the man just knew said person. Huh, it seems I'll get to see my old student once more. I wonder how that old pervert is doing. With Naruto and Kakashi . It was already night time and Kakashi was reading his book while observing Naruto trying consecutive times to climb the entire tree only for his feet to slip from its hold, and Naruto uses the momentum to flip and land on his feet on the ground. The blonde already managed to reach half of the tree, but for some reason, he was adamant about going all the way, even though his chakra was starting to deplete. Naruto for his part was panting on the ground severely. He kept trying a few more, but he couldn't anymore and he dropped unconscious on the ground, earning a sigh in dismay from his sensei. Immediately picking the blonde on his arms, Kakashi proceeded towards the cottage, before placing Naruto on his bed. Inside Naruto's mindscape . Directly after being unconscious, the blonde started dreaming about something. He suddenly woke up below a different roof as he listened to the calming noise of a river. Getting up from his bed, Naruto walked towards the door, before opening it, revealing a rather spacious garden with the river in the middle. It was strange to the blonde how familiar he felt as he walked throughout the deck towards the kitchen. Upon entry, the blonde saw what appeared to be a gorgeous black-haired woman doing the dishes while singing. The blonde found that the voice was incredibly enticing and comforting, thus remaining there to listen. The woman, though, stopped and turned to see the blonde. "Good morning, Sasuke-kun. Did you sleep well?" Naruto was surprised at the greeting, but, somehow, he greeted this person as if he was Uchiha Sasuke. But what surprised him the most was Sasuke's response. "I have okasan, what's for breakfast?" Naruto or Sasuke pushed the chair and took a sit by the table as he saw Sasuke's mother place some pancakes in front of him with a bottle of orange juice. "Eat up, Sasuke-kun, or you'll be late for the academy." The blonde was confused. He knew this was a dream. How could he not? In here he was Sasuke, after all. So why didn't he wake up? The blonde never knew his mother, so a strange feeling hit him out of a sudden and he wondered if this what it feels like to be loved by a mother. Suddenly, the image fast-forwarded and Naruto saw himself on the door leaving before Sasuke's mother appeared, giving him a peck on the cheek, before giving Sasuke's lunch. "Good luck at the academy today, Sasuke-kun. I want to hear about it when you come back." Naruto could very well feel his skin getting warmer, which indicated a heavy blush on Sasuke's face, but he couldn't help but smile at his mom for how much love she provides for him. "Sure do, Okasan. I'll make you proud of me." Being only a kid, Sasuke shot his arms to the sky in order to prove to his mother that he really meant what he said and would do everything to please the lovely lady. However, what the woman said, Naruto was feeling his heart getting warmer and he couldn't help but smile at Sasuke's memory. "I'm already proud of you, Sasuke-kun, more than you imagine." The dream fast-forwarded once more until Naruto saw it once more, images of what happened on that fateful night, but instead of everyone getting killed by Itachi's hands, the only image that now stood before Naruto was that of Sasuke's mother dead by his father's side. The blonde suddenly jerked open his eyes and noticed that he was back at the cottage, which meant he might have passed out and Kakashi-sensei brought him here. Looking to the side, he saw the man in question sound asleep, before he looked at the ceiling once more. The dreams were beginning to improve, but no matter what happened, it always ended with images of the Uchiha massacre, much to the blonde's chagrin and constant curse. It didn't matter, though, as in time, he would find a way to cope with what happened. 5 more months passed in a blur to Naruto and Kakashi as the blonde's training escalated in level of both hardship and skill. Needless to say, his weights more than doubled, as well as the repetitions required by Kakashi in order to complete the exercise. And as usual, in every physical exercise, by orders from his sensei, Naruto would keep his Sharingan active at all times. This way the blonde not only improved his muscles, but also his already considerable chakra control, as constantly doing the tree walking exercise could only help him improve so much. Kakashi chose not to teach Naruto the water walking exercise yet. He would wait until he started grilling the blonde in ninjutsu. Regarding the art in question, Naruto already proved to his sensei that he was ready to be taught the art of fire manipulation, as it happened to be the blonde's affinity. Usually Kakashi wouldn't be surprised because fire-type chakra seemed to run inside every Uchiha's chakra coils. But Naruto wasn't an Uchiha, at least not by birth. The Junin only reasoned that since Sasuke's DNA mingled with the blonde's, then Naruto now possessed a fire affinity as well. Another extraordinary feat was his Sharingan. Seeing that the eye evolved to the second stage a couple days ago, increasing both his taijutsu style and his speed. Right now, the Sharingan users were sparring and Kakashi, this time, wasn't slowing his movements. At least, not like he was before, anyway. His speed was adequate to keep up with a low-level Chunin, but he held back a little regarding the strength behind his punches. Nevertheless, he was impressed with his student, as Naruto always managed to be one step ahead of his strikes. If he didn't outright dodge, he was managing to block almost all Kakashi's strikes. Just as Naruto blocked a high kick from Kakashi, he aimed a kick of his own at his sensei's legs. However, the man simply back-flipped a couple times and threw some shuriken at Naruto. Kakashi was already expecting the blonde to dodge so that he could charge and attack when he least expected. Instead, Naruto just let the shuriken hit him. His body was replaced with a log. That movement alone made Kakashi smile and focus his attention to see where Naruto would come from. Suddenly a hand came from the ground fast and grabbed his ankle, surprising Kakashi. Doden Shinju Zanshu no Jutsu, Earth Release. Groundhog Decapitation Jutsu. As Kakashi went inside the ground until only his head remained above the surface, Naruto showed up with a grin on his face. The Junin was surprised that Naruto managed to copy this low-level Doden Jutsu from seeing Kakashi using it. But what surprised him more was the flawless execution of the technique. A feat that only those with a Doden affinity managed to execute. Naruto, however, frowned as Kakashi never stopped smiling at him, meaning that something was wrong with this picture. Good job, Naruto. You kind of surprised me with the jutsu. However, suddenly, the voice came from behind, followed by a kunai being placed right below Naruto's chin. Don't simply expect that a Junin would fall for such a simple technique. Seeing that his plan backfired, Naruto didn't have a choice but to give up, seeing as Kakashi already won the match. However, he knew that his sensei didn't know about the Doden Jutsu, and he managed to surprise Kakashi a great deal. The man for his part kept the kunai inside his holster and picked 2 chakra papers this time before handling both to the blonde. I was trying to think why your Doden affinity didn't appear last time we checked your affinity, but now I realize why. When your affinity is fire, the entire paper burns, and when your affinity is earth, then the entire paper crumbles into dust. So in other words, one paper wouldn't be able to show both affinities. Now, focus chakra on both papers and let's confirm your affinities. The result were as Kakashi predicted, seeing that the paper held by Naruto's right hand was on fire and the one on the left crumbled into dust. Seeing the predicament he was now in, the sensei considered what he would choose to teach the blonde. Both natures weren't hard to learn, but fire jutsus had to be practiced with care. The silver-haired Junin lost count of how many unfortunate shinobi had to retire because of badly executing fire jutsus. Cases like burning lungs and severe sore throats were only a few of the problems, and he didn't want Naruto to practice on his own. Thus he chose Doden to teach the boy. Also, since Naruto learned this one jutsu on his own, Kakashi figured that Naruto already knew how to use earth-based jutsus with efficiency. Looking at his student, Kakashi saw that he was waiting for some kind of explanation, but first he needed to reach a second level of chakra control before beginning fire manipulation. Okay Naruto, I'll teach you some fire jutsus, but for now we'll focus on more chakra control as well as cover some theory about fire manipulation. It's important for you in the long run to control the exact amount needed to produce a fire technique. You don't know the implications of a jutsu blowing on your face. The look of the blonde's face told him different as a sudden realization hit Kakashi. The very reason that Naruto had the Sharingan was because he was hit by a fire jutsu courtesy of Itachi, causing him to lose his original set of cerulean blue eyes in the process. Okay, so you do know. Sorry about that. What I meant is if you don't have a good grasp of chakra control, there will be a high chance that you either burn your lungs or your throat, which would end your ninja career immediately. So I will teach you an exercise called water walking, and the principle is similar to the tree walking, but a little different. It's like this. At Konoha . Sarutobi Hiruzen was inside his office, checking the never-ending pile of mission reports just like any cage did before him. Today was considered a normal day for the professor, as he gathered all D and low C ranked mission reports and stamped his signature repeatedly, without even bothering to read them. These types of mission didn't require his attention apart from those that the Chunin responsible placed in a separate pile. This kept Sarutobi from having to check every damn report before giving his signature. After his secretary took the whole lot, she left a cup of warm tea in front of the aged Hokage, to which he appreciated and bid the lovely woman goodbye for the day. A cup of tea meant one of his much-deserved breaks throughout the day, not only because of his duty but also because of his old age. Taking his time to smell the delightful herb scent, Hiruzen took a nice sip of the warm liquid as he looked at the village he was responsible for through his office window. The kids were playing like they were supposed to do. Anbu were patrolling the village. Everything was like it should be, in the Hokage's opinion. However, for no reason whatsoever, the image of Naruto appeared in front of him, and it was showing that old goofy smile of his, screaming to everyone that he would take the Hokage's hat and replace the old man as he used to call Hiruzen. After a while, a new image of Naruto appeared in his mind, and this time, it was the current Naruto after the tragic events surrounding the deceased Uchiha clan. Sarutobi, so far, wasn't able to swallow the recent turn of events and Naruto's sudden quiet demeanor. As you grow old, there were only a handful of occasions that managed to fill the heart with joy, and it pained Sarutobi to realize that the Naruto he knew back then probably was killed along with the Uchiha clan. Of course, the Hokage blamed himself for such a predicament. In Naruto's position, being at the wrong place at the wrong time almost cost him his life, but the aged Hokage always thought he could have done something to avoid this tragic event. If he had managed to maintain some level of diplomacy with the Uchiha clan, he would have been able to reach a compromise, meaning none of this would have happened. Also, he supposed Naruto deserved better than having to fetch food by himself by looking in the garbage. Had his fridge remained full, the blonde wouldn't feel the need to search for food, thus he wouldn't be close to the Uchiha clan compound at the night of Itachi's assault. Nevertheless, dwindling on the past wouldn't solve the issue. No matter what happened, nothing would be able to reverse time and salvage the blonde from suffering the agonizing pain of witnessing firsthand the brutal massacre of one of the strongest clans in Konoha. The least Sarutobi could do was to dissuade the council from pressing the matter further, seeing as Naruto's presence inside the compound raised some unwanted questions. In this department, though, Sarutobi had enough skills both as a respectful shinobi and as a politician to relay the true story of what happened, therefore discharging the blonde from any misjudged accusations. Problem was that, as he feared it would happen, Sarutobi was forced to reveal Naruto's new possession, the Sharingan. At the time he saw the faces of shock displayed by his council members and the clan chiefs as they all thought the bloodline was extinguished, with Itachi being the only one left. It took a long time of discussions and medical reports, but in the end, the entire council was convinced that while Naruto could use the Sharingan to its full capacity, there wasn't any scientific proof that the blonde would be able to pass the Uchiha DNA to his offspring. This was upsetting to a few members, especially to the old war hawk Danzo, as this happened to be his idea at the time. With said issue being declared impossible by the council, Sarutobi turned to more pressing matters like the boys' training mission under Hitaki Kakashi and the constant improvements proven by Kakashi's written reports. Obviously, Danzo showed his claws once more, trying to convince the council that the boy was to be trained by him in order to reach his fullest capacity. However, the entire council knew of Danzu's old, to some, still current, training methods and voted against it. All were in favor of Hitaki Kakashi training the boy, as he happened to be an elite Junin and also possessor of the Sharingan Eye. After that, there wasn't much to be discussed, so Sarutobi closed the meeting, appreciating the ones present. This happened a month ago, and since then, the subject of Naruto was rarely discussed between the Hokage and his advisors, except when it was regarding any new skill the boy learned under Kakashi's guidance. Some clan heads were interested in the boy's development, like Hyuga Hiyashi, Nara Shikamaru, Yamanaka Inoichi, and Sum Inuzuka. All four of them knew how arrogant the Uchihas turned out to be in time, and they worried that Naruto would display similar behavior. Hiruzen explained to them that there was little chance of someone like Naruto becoming arrogant. It simply wasn't in his nature to be consumed or blinded by power. At first the clan heads were skeptical, seeing as none of them had knowledge of any Uchiha displaying lessons of humility, but the Hokage chose to relay to them Naruto's constant conversations with Kakashi about what happened at the Uchiha massacre and his desire to train harder in order to protect what's sacred to him. Since then, no one bothered him anymore about Naruto, and the Hokage smiled, knowing that with the blonde out of the village, he managed to handle the situation with ease and convince the council that there was little ground for worry. Back to the present. As the herbal tea was almost finished, a little plume smoke appeared on his desk before Kakashi's personal dog Summon Pakun appeared holding a scroll in his mouth. Ah, Pakun, I'm glad Kakashi isn't tardy when it comes to sending the reports. How is Naruto doing these days? As the dog released the scroll from his mouth, he explained that everything was written on the scroll and that he had little to no interaction with the blonde to know anything about his training. Of course, Sarutobi knew that, and yet every time he asked the same thing to the dog, but his intention was merely to start any possible conversation. He dismissed Pakun, before opening the scroll to read its contents. According to Kakashi, Naruto met both his and the Hokage's expectations as he evolved the Sharingan to the second level. His taijutsu was improving exponentially, as well as both his muscularity and agility. Sarutobi knew and favored Kakashi's harsh training method, considering that Naruto would need to be prepared for what lay ahead in the future. But what shocked him the most was Kakashi's surprised statement saying that Naruto didn't have only fire affinity like previously stated, but also a secondary earth affinity. It wasn't strange to see shinobi possessing more than one affinity, but Naruto will be 10 years old in a couple months, and certainly only a few like Kakashi himself and Itachi displayed such level of ninjutsu skills by the age of 9. Sarutobi knew the implications of comparing Naruto with Itachi, as young prodigies were frowned upon by the villagers and shinobi of Konoha. Nevertheless, by Kakashi's report, Naruto could very well learn fire jutsus by the time he came back, and it wouldn't be much harder to know a few earth-based jutsus, meaning that Naruto could very well be considered a prodigy by the Hokage's standards. Another fact was that Kakashi managed to drill in the blonde's head the importance of the Sharingan being considered a mere tool to be used and not to become dependent on it. Right now, Kakashi was teaching Naruto some heavy chakra control exercises, as he didn't want Naruto's fire jutsus to hurt his organs. This was an intelligent precaution in Hiruzen's opinion, considering the number of accidents caused by failed attempts in the past. All in all, Naruto was training to become a well-rounded individual, as all arts were covered in Kakashi's training. Genjutsu, while being the less trained, was also covered by Kakashi, as he taught the blonde how to dispel them effectively. Not to mention that the blonde could very well learn some Kenjutsu as well if Kakashi agreed to teach him in the future. Kakashi must be excited to teach Naruto as much as possible, and Naruto doesn't complain, absorbing all this knowledge like a sponge. Surely, I'll expect great things from you, Naruto-kun. Back to his work, Sarutobi started to read the A and B mission level reports with a smile on his face, as he was imagining the blonde in a couple of years as a shinobi of the leaf. With Naruto . At the end of the day, Naruto was soaked. Unlike the tree walking exercise, he couldn't escape from falling in the river every time he couldn't get the exercise right. And the fact that Kakashi was finding his numerous attempts humorous didn't help matters. Naruto could see that his sensei was controlling himself not to hold his stomach from laughing so hard. Problem was that chakra control exercises required both concentration and patience, and somehow, the blonde was lacking both, as his mind was running a mile a minute. Thoughts about ninjutsu, Taijutsu, Uchiha Massacre, Sasuke's memories, his memories, Genjutsu dispelling. All this information was fighting for dominance inside his mind and he couldn't bring himself to concentrate. Lack of patience was obvious as at the same time he thought about everything, he also wished to finish this goddamn exercise. Kakashi knew of his problems right now, but considering the number of accomplishments in the last 2 months he figured that Naruto shouldn't rush into things and learn how to focus on the task in hand. After a few more failed attempts, the silver-haired Junin looked to the sky and realized that the sun was already setting and the moon was already up, meaning that the exercise was finished for today. Okay Naruto, let's wrap it up for today. Tomorrow will be another day for you to try to complete this exercise. Kakashi said, earning a nod from the blonde as he got out of the water and picked up his clothes. Student and sensei went back to their cottage together. On the way, though, Naruto kept cursing himself for not being able to complete the exercise. Kakashi tried to explain that this method is taught to genins and above for better improving chakra control. For Naruto to manage in one day would be counterproductive to his training as he wouldn't take full advantage of it. It was better to learn at a slow pace than rush it and not fully improve his chakra control. I know Kakashi-sensei. I was just overwhelmed a bit. I'll try and relax some. What's for dinner tonight? Naruto asked before he sighed upon seeing a couple of vegetables near his sensei. Those, in his experience, would certainly be used for a stew that Kakashi learned to make. You know better than to ask questions all the time, Naruto. Now why don't you grab some water as I prepare the vegetables? As Naruto grabbed some water, the stew was prepared as both student and sensei ate their dish in comfortable silence. It wasn't long before the dish was separated and the two got inside the respectful sleeping bags. Next day . As the sun rose on the horizon, Naruto and Kakashi were already up and the blonde was going through some warming up exercises around the clearing. The Junin, though, focused solely on reading his favorite book as Naruto now finished his required 10 laps around the vicinity, followed by some push-ups and sit-ups. After he finished, it was once more time to strip his clothes as he would be attempting the water walking exercise at the lake nearby. Naruto nodded and went straight to the lake, while considering the last failed attempts. He knew that with the damn weights on his body the entire time, he would never finish the exercise. I suppose that if I could drop the weights, I'd be able to finish the exercise much sooner. Kakashi's smile told him the answer he was already expecting, but no one could say he didn't try. As he ran towards the lake ahead of Kakashi, the man considered reminding the blonde not to use the Sharingan, before he grinned once he heard his student's silent mumbles and considerable list of curses to his slave driver sensei. As Naruto neared the river margin, he took one step at a time as the water level reached his knees, just like every attempt before. Yesterday, he didn't consider at least standing on top of the water before walking as he was lacking the needed patience and concentration to break the exercise. Immediately focusing chakra to his feet, Naruto slowly started to flow almost on top of the water, before he had to relinquish control over it. Kakashi saw this and frowned, even though Naruto understood the importance of walking before running. Naruto, I can see you learned what you need to attain first and that's good. However, you're doing it the wrong way. You can't just increase the chakra amount and expect it to flow on its own. You have to learn the appropriate amount of chakra needed to step on the water. Then you have to hold that same amount of chakra as you walk on top of the water. Try using a specific amount of chakra to stand on top of the water. If it's not enough, try again increasing the chakra. If it's less than required, do the opposite. Once you learn how much chakra is needed to maintain a float, you have to memorize the amount as you start walking. Why don't you try again? Naruto accepted the teaching and tried just as Kakashi advised him. This time Naruto managed to reach the ankles region, before he started to sink. Within 30 minutes, the blonde was already able to at least stand on water as he closed his eyes. Memorizing the needed chakra was a tough procedure and he needed time to focus on exactly how much was being used at the moment so that he could start the water walking exercise. Kakashi would remain there patiently as he watched Naruto concentrate. He knew the blonde would manage the exercise in time. He only needed to process the information. Suddenly, Kakashi felt the need to turn his attention from his book as he had a feeling that the next attempt would prove fruitful. True to his instincts, The blonde opened his eyes and focused on maintaining the necessary chakra amount as he started walking on top of the water the same way he would walk on solid ground, albeit a bit slower like Kakashi advised. Within time, Naruto increased his steps and after a couple of minutes focusing on chakra control, the blonde was getting the hang of the exercise, much to Kakashi's satisfied grin as Naruto took his explanation to heart and applied it accordingly. Okay Naruto, keep walking until you feel able to run. I want you to focus on this until lunchtime. After we eat, I'll give a crash course of fire manipulation and even teach you a low-level fire jutsu. Now after you're done here meet me near the cottage. I'll be responsible for preparing lunch as a reward for you finishing this exercise. But tonight is your time to cook and wash the dishes. After their stomachs were satisfied, Kakashi and Naruto now stood in front of the lake as Kakashi would be teaching Naruto fire manipulation. The theory was pretty much covered by understanding the fusion between chakra and gathering air inside the lungs. The air will serve as ignition for the fire to accumulate at the throat, before the technique is to be released towards a certain target. The only problem was accumulating the fire inside Naruto's throat for a while, as this happened to be the part where most shinobi failed in learning the art of fire manipulation, burning their throats beyond salvation. Okay Naruto, you learned about the procedure from the books and from what I explained. Now, you'll have to use your chakra more than ever as it will serve to protect your organs against the accumulated fire. There is one jutsu you'll learn for now, and this happens to be the easiest jutsu to learn. Also, for the purpose of your safety you can use the Sharingan to copy both the hand seals and the chakra needed for this technique. Now activate and pay attention. Naruto only nodded as Kakashi started a sequence of 4 hand seals, finishing with the tiger seal as Naruto's Sharingan suddenly gave him the image of chakra being gathered at Kakashi's lungs, before growing to his throat. Kakashi then positioned his right hand in front of his mouth to direct the fire technique. Kaden Enden, fire release. Fireball jutsu. The blonde could only see a considerable fireball emerged from Kakashi's mouth as it maintained hovering atop the small river. The temperature was unnaturally hot as Kakashi explained it was being increased by chakra. The technique went on for a while, before Kakashi stopped and the temperature fell back to normal. By now I believe the information gathered by your Sharingan is enough for you to perform this technique. So go right ahead and try. He understood the consequences of the fire technique backfiring. It sure left a scar, though it didn't show in the mirror. The memory of Itachi's fire attack that night played in his mind consecutive times as he actually believed it would be the last image he would ever see if he didn't have this new set of eyes. And to believe it could happen again, Naruto was reluctant to try as he continued to stare at the river in front of him. Kakashi knew what his student was thinking at the moment, but Naruto needed to forget about that if he wanted to be a master at using fire techniques. Suddenly he gathered his resolve and closed his eyes in concentration as he focused on the information gathered by the Sharingan regarding the fireball technique. Kakashi watched closely as the blonde's hands began to gather together to form the first hand seal. The Junin actually expected Naruto to stop the hand seals because of what happened in the past, but he continued now reaching the third hand seal. By this time, Naruto must be fusing chakra with the air inside his lungs, thus igniting a fire-induced chakra. Finally the tiger seal was formed. As the blonde positioned his hand in front of his mouth, he exhaled a thin layer of white fire, before the thin layer expanded just like Kakashi's technique. Maintaining the technique for a while, he turned his eyes to see a smiling Kakashi, which always meant a job well done. Nice job, Naruto. Now, I know your throat is hurting at the moment, but you'll get used to in the future. Now practice the technique without the Sharingan. When I feel you're adequate with the technique, I'll teach you another. Kakashi said as he suddenly grabbed his orange book and started reading as Naruto repeated the technique time and time again. At Konoha . Hiruzen Sarutobi was considered a patient man. Day in and day night, though, he was considering slicing the throats of every member of the council, as right now they were bickering about the discovery of Naruto's second affinity before he even graduated the academy. He considered holding the information for a while, but he in the end decided to show it to the council. Big mistake. Some of them demanded the boy needed to be executed from fear that he had too much power and could eventually turn against the village. Of course, this came from a lone civilian member, but the idea was discarded by the warhawk Danzo, before he offered the stupid idea that Naruto needed to be tutored by him, instead of Kakashi. Although this idea was already vetoed by this very council, Danzo still wanted to pressure this topic, much to Sarutobi Hiruzen's agonizing headache. For the last time, Danzo, Naruto's training won't be transferred to you, nor will he be at any point in the future. Now, I just called this meeting to inform you all about his development, that's all. Now, this meeting has ended. Shikaku, Hiyashi, please follow me to my office, I wish to talk to you too. At the Hokage's office. Once the Hokage took a sit behind his office, he started addressing a matter of great concern to his now most trusted individuals. I'm worried about Danzo and his never-ending interest in Naruto. I fear that he may use his root ninja for something I dare not mention out loud. Both Hiyashi and Shikaku narrowed their eyes at this, as Danzo was a threat no matter which side he was on. It was Hiyashi who spoke first. I happen to share your concern as well, Hokage-sama. If you so wish, I could choose a group from my clan to keep close watch with Kakashi, just in case he decides to step out of the shadows. Hiruzen was considering the offer, but an entire group may prove suspicious and Danzo might use his political influence in the council to cause trouble. No, he could be up to anything given the circumstances, and I don't want to give him more ammunition. Perhaps it would be wiser to select one member from your clan Hiyashi to watch for any of Danzo's root Anbu. I wonder if Kasumi is available for such a task. She is Hokage-sama. I'll tell her to come here right away. Hiyashi said, as he reached for the Anbu was in charge of protecting the Hokage in order to call Hyuga Kasumi, while Shikaku remained talking to the Hokage. The man thought he was there for no reason, as he kept hearing Hiruzen and Hiyashi's conversation regarding Hyuga Kasumi's new guardian mission. Shikaku, while Hiyashi calls Kasumi, I'll ask something of you as well. You're one of the brightest minds this village has ever produced, and as such, I wish for you to keep your eyes on Danzo. The man had the decency to look at Hiruzen with incredulity. Sure, it wasn't impossible, as the lazy genius had already managed to spy on important daimyos in the past, but surely for Hiruzen to ask this of him meant that either he wanted to silence Danzo for good or expose him and his undercover Roots Anbu program. Nevertheless, this request had its merit. After all, a Hokage couldn't have someone by his side controlling the turn of events from the shadows. The Nara wouldn't be surprised if Danzo was behind some of the major murder events in the history of Fire Country now that he thought about it. Hiruzen was watching the lazy genius with patience, as he knew the seriousness of this mission. Spying one of the most influential individuals in Fire Country, apart from the Hokage and the Fire Lord, was dangerous and could even lead to the man's death, if he managed to dig deep enough. Shikaku, I understand if you're reluctant to, Hiruzen said, but Shikaku interrupted him. I'll accept the mission, Hokage-sama. Danzo's acts have remained to go on for far too long. Now, is there anything you wish me to focus on? Hiruzen smiled, before explaining the details behind this SS class mission. 2 days later. Kaden Dai Enden, Fire Release. Great Fireball Jutsu. The now doubled in sized fireball emerged from Naruto's mouth, before it hovered atop the river. The fire was so hot that it increased the speed in which the water was evaporated. When the water level pretty much reduced to half, Naruto relinquished the control over his technique before looking to Kakashi. In 2 days, Naruto did nothing more than practice his 2 fire jutsus, much to Kakashi's approval, as he envisioned great things going on for Naruto in the future. Okay Naruto, for now we'll remain with these 2 techniques, as I believe it will be enough for you to learn how to use fire techniques appropriately. Now, deactivate your Sharingan and come at me with the intent to kill. Naruto happily obliged as he charged at the Junin with a roundhouse kick. He saw Kakashi lifting his right arm to block the incoming kick. Naruto suddenly flipped in midair, switching both his legs and the side of the attack. Kakashi was surprised, but he quickly recovered and managed to evade the kick before it connected. Naruto used the flight momentum and flipped, before stepping on the ground. He threw 4 shuriken at Kakashi, but all 4 of the projectiles were embedded on the tree as Kakashi evaded them all by jumping to the right. Naruto had been counting on Kakashi doing so, as he made some hand seals before exhaling a regular fireball jutsu straight towards Kakashi's future position, forcing Kakashi to create a water barrier around him for protection. Of course, he could have simply dodged and conserved chakra, but Kakashi felt that showing Naruto how to utilize jutsu for defense as well as attack would serve him well in the future. Naruto learned that his sensei's vision was obscured by the water around him, so Naruto charged Kakashi until he landed a solid punch to Kakashi's face. The problem was that in Kakashi's place was a log. Naruto turned to his right, only to receive a strong kick on his face which sent him flying towards the river. Controlling some chakra to his feet, Naruto just skidded along the water until he stopped near the margin. He slowly wiped some blood from his mouth while watching for Kakashi. Suddenly, Kakashi started some hand seals and, quite to Naruto's horror, finished with the tiger hand seal, before gathering a great deal of air inside his lungs. Kaden Gukaku no Jutsu, Fire Release. Grand Fireball Jutsu. Naruto could only watch as the fireball kept increasing in size until it was easily twice as strong as the Great Fireball technique. Suddenly activating his Sharingan, Naruto saw the ball of doom charging at him slowly. He focused chakra to his feet and jumped away from the attack as it hit a tree behind the blonde, pretty much destroying the entire area. Even though Naruto managed to dodge, he couldn't help but witness the scene of destruction that a strong fire technique could cause. He landed on the ground once more and saw that the fire was spreading to the other trees as not only the wind but also the wood increased the fire's destruction. Kakashi landed near him as he suddenly did a large series of hand seals. Naruto sensed the chakra molding and looked to Kakashi with his Sharingan active. The information was transferred instantly, just as Kakashi finished with the bird hand seal. Suiden Suiryuden no Jutsu, Water Release. Water Dragon Jutsu. The remaining water of the river transformed into a fierce creature of water as it charged towards the fire in order to extinguish it. The effect was instantaneous as water chakra dominated fire chakra, thus saving the forest from being burned to a crisp. I take it you wish to talk about something, Naruto, Kakashi said, awakening the blonde from his daydream. Naruto looked at him for a while, before looking at the forest in front of him now covered in smoke. I was just imagining what would happen if I was hit with that technique instead of the forest. I'd be dead easily. Indeed, you would. But I knew you'd do the right thing. You activated your Sharingan in order to dodge the technique. In case you didn't, I'd stop the technique right away before it ever reached you. Another thing, while I know you copied the water technique I just did, I don't want you trying it anytime soon. You just don't have the chakra for it yet. For now let's remain with the techniques you just learned, and tonight I'll give you a scroll on some earth techniques for you to learn in your own free time. The blonde nodded before both returned to the place they were sleeping, only to see a woman there wearing black cargo anbu pants and a Junin jacket as she stood there with her arms crossed with a bored expression on her face. She had black hair which happened to be tied up in a ponytail, thus showing her Hyuga-like eyes. While her body language was calm, the woman's expression told Naruto otherwise as he could suddenly feel a bad tension arriving. Good evening, Kasumi. I'm surprised to see you here of all places. Last time we saw each other was at the Anbu Core. Can I talk to you in private, Kakashi? Her voice was clear, meaning she wasn't the type to sugarcoat things, at least in Naruto's opinion, as he saw Kakashi following the Hyuga. Deciding that whatever the woman needed with the Junin wasn't his business, he went inside the cabin as some relaxation was in order. Once alone, Kasumi and Kakashi looked at each other. The man was waiting for a slap to come, but none came, much to his surprise, as Kasumi just stood there glaring daggers at him, presumably from what he did to her at the time they were a part of the Anbu force. Suddenly he heard a sigh escaping from her as she started talking. Okay, as much as I protested to Hiyashi-sama, I'm stuck with you in order to protect Naruto-kun. Kakashi always knew Kasumi wasn't very talkative, rather preferring to get right to the point, but she wasn't finished. Hokage-sama felt that Danzo might want something with Naruto and he assigned me to aid you in protecting the boy for reasons that seemed strange to me, considering no one would attack you, but here I am. Kasumi said, earning a nod from Kakashi as he was already informed of her presence from the Hokage. In the scroll, Hiruzen alerted him of Danzo's never-ending interest in Naruto's training and that he may resort to kidnapping the blonde. Kasumi's presence here meant that her Byakugan would be more than enough to alert them of any intrusions in the vicinity. Plus, Kakashi considered it would be nice for Naruto to practice his skills against the Byakugan and the Jiyuken, as it happened to be the most deadly taijutsu style in existence. Even though he knew she was coming, it didn't mean he liked it, as both had their fair share of history in the past. Kakashi at the time was already an Anbu captain, and to him, nothing mattered other than the safety of his team and the mission's completion. However, over time he met Kasumi and the two started hanging out together. Afraid of her being killed because of being with him, Kakashi ended their relationship. Everyone important in his life had been killed and he couldn't bear to lose someone else precious to him. But the woman didn't take it that well. Needless to say, she was very irritated at Kakashi and hadn't spoken to him since he blew her off without any proper explanation. So tell me, Kakashi, since I'm stuck with you until Naruto-kun returns to the village, why don't you tell me something about his skills and what can I do to help him improve? People are talking about this boy and I want to know some more about what he can do. Needless to say, the boy is a prodigy. Taijutsu is high genin level and ninjutsu is off the charts for even a low-level chunin. He's already improved a lot, but you'd be able to increase his taijutsu skills greatly, considering that you're a master in the area. Kakashi and Kasumi talked a lot about the blonde's skills, thus starting a conversation for the first time in almost 10 years.